Hello, friends out there.
Hello, hello, hello. Big day here in the Coup. Jordan Sheridan with
Jen dies.
Chris Garrett already showing the love.
All
Five
right, OG
dollars.
Chris Garrett.
$5. Show some super chat love for all Status Quo's hard work, perseverance, and determination. Thank you, thank you,
Woohoo!
Chris. Colin, if you could get that text message out. We're definitely gonna wait a minute or two for more people to trickle in, because boy,
Smash that like button, friends. We have a great news today. Great news. We have great news.
big news. Full disclosure, we'll be multitasking a little bit because we're trying to get the story out more and more traction. So I'm mass DMing everybody I know to share the story. And Jen has also been reaching out to journalists. So we will be paying attention to you, our audience, but also, trying to get the story out more. Wouldn't it be nice if we had more staff to help us with that? So
yeah, well, yeah. I mean, don't make it sound like we're going to be just like doing our own thing. Well, we're going to be going through the story, which is really, really important. And we want to break it down so that it's easily understood. And so that you guys know, exactly what's going on, and so that you can then share it and help us get it out there.
correct.
So smash the like button, folks. Share the stream. If you're watching us on whatever platforms you're on, do whatever those platforms do. Like us on, do whatever, follow us on Rockfin.
Yeah. Also, create your own social media post telling people we're live and talking about this bombshell story. So, first of all, before we get to the story, I apologize if my voice is a little raspy. I've been coughing like a crazy person. It's not COVID, but COVID has caused the cough. I've been coughing basically for 2, 3 weeks. I got COVID tested. It's not COVID. I have asthma as a result of having COVID last year, and I can't get rid of this damn cough. I just was on the phone with my doctor, so hopefully what she's prescribing helps. So just so you know, if I'm coughing, it's not COVID, just asthma. But Jen, we've been teasing a pretty significant. We've been teasing a significant story for a couple months. Maybe for our members, the next members call will explain what the delay was about, give you all the details. But that story dropped today in the Intercept as well as the Detroit Metro Times. We've done some reporting for both the Intercept before and Metro Times. In my view, I don't know about you, Jen, the Detroit Metro Times, which you should definitely, Colin, if you could put that link in there, you should click on that to give them, the click to the story. To me, they're the only Michigan outlet that I've seen actually still gives a damn about the Flint water crisis and cover up. So we're really happy and proud to do it with them, as well as the Intercept, who, frankly, gets some grief out there, but was the only national outlet willing to do it. And, I appreciate Ryan Grimm for working with us to do this. And Jen, to me, the biggest headline here, and we'll get into all the details. I think this story, once and for all, breaks. The Flint water crisis is one of the biggest cases of government corruption, national or local, in modern American history. I would argue it's the biggest case of corruption in the 21st century. And this corruption, which we're about to reveal to you, was hanging out in plain sight and should have been revealed years ago. But for a lot of reasons, the media did not do that. Would you agree with that assessment, Jen?
I absolutely would agree with that. And as you say, kudos to the Intercept and to Ryan Grimm, who greenlit this article. And yeah, I mean, it's shameful how difficult it is to get a story about Flint out there. So we're very grateful and happy that this is out right now. Yeah, you should now see the full Metro Times link in the chat box. You can also find it on The Intercept. And yeah, we're going to break it down for everybody. We're still waiting for folks to trickle in. We've only been live for 5 minutes at this point. But I think what's important to note here is that there's a lot of evidence of this alleged cover-up coming from the highest step in Michigan government, former Michigan Governor Rick Snyder and all of his cronies. And you'll be shocked and horrified, I think. Mike Appleyard is saying, reveal the story already. I have to go back to work right away. So, Mike I suggest... No, I suggest for you that you just give it a read or whatever, or watch this at another point. This isn't something we can kind of like condense in 30 seconds. This is a huge, huge, huge story. And, you know, I mean, it's going to be hard to not respond to these comments. But while people are trickling in, we can. No, like the crap that Ryan Grimm gets on Twitter is ridiculous. He's greenlit 2 Flint stories. He's literally one of the only editors out there who gives a damn. That's a national media. And it is absurd, like the hate that he gets on Twitter. It's absurd. This is the stuff that matters. Like literally go look at the Intercept front page right now. Look at the stories that are there and the stories that matter. Police corruption, the Flint water crisis, really, really scummy stuff that's going on that needs to be uncovered, and the Intercept is doing it. Like, what do you want? People to like throw tomatoes at each other on YouTube? No. The Intercept's doing good reporting.
He doesn't rant enough for that against the squad.
Yeah. So, and also he has a great book. We've got people like just, it's crazy to me. So there will be no Ryan Grimm hate on this chat today because I am super grateful that this Flint reporting is able to get out there. Smash that like button if you are on YouTube. Retweet, open up right now your browser and go look at Jordan Sheridan and retweet the Flint story tweet. It is pinned at the top of his profile, and it is so, so important that we get this out to more people. Yeah. You'll probably notice that we're a little bit tired. I mean, there's a lot that goes into this. And last night at about 1 a.m., a little bit after, the story came out in the Detroit Metro Times, and then we were on pins and needles waiting for the Intercept version to come out because it took a little bit. But it's out. It's out. This has been months in the making, and a lot went into this. And we have a lot of background to give you as well. So I think perhaps we've waited long enough for folks to come in. So we shall get started and tell you what is happening and what everyone needs to know about the Flint water crisis.
So smash that like button. We got 200 people watching. Everybody press like. Before we get to this story, I think it's important to have a rewind of what we broke earlier in the year because it's connected. So earlier in the year, actually the same day Trump was impeached for the second time, that was in January, we broke a story with The Intercept that showed Governor Snyder, who was Michigan governor presiding over the Flint water crisis, he basically, he perjured himself to Congress, and that he lied about when he first learned of Flint's toxic water. He told Congress he did not know about the deadly Legionella outbreak. Legionella is a deadly waterborne bacteria that, if you get it, it's basically a severe pneumonia, and you could die from it. And Flint's water switch led to a major increase in Legionella bacteria. It killed, the state number was 12. PBS has found it could be into the hundreds. I believe it's way more than a couple hundred. I think it's a lot more than that. So our story in January centered around prosecutors had obtained Rick Snyder's phone calls, as well as his chief of staff and the Department of Health and Human Services. So basically the 3 top officials related to the water crisis: the governor, chief of staff, health director. And what they found was at a crucial period, and this is a long time ago, we're going back 7 years, at a crucial period in October 2014, for those of you who live in Michigan, that was weeks before Governor Snyder's reelection. During that crucial period, the governor, his chief of staff, and health director were on the phone over 2 days, rapid fire, upwards of 22 times. Why that's important is the prosecution kind of mapped out how often do these people talk, and they found that other than those 2 days, most of these people on this phone chain did not talk often, or if at all, before then. And because of the sequence of the phone calls, which included Snyder never directly talked to his health director. It would be Snyder calls his chief of staff. Chief of staff gets off the phone right away and calls the health director. Or the reverse. The health director calls the chief of staff. The chief of staff gets off the phone, immediately calls Snyder. That's what we call a cutout. So prosecutors concluded that this rapid fire phone calls in October 2014 was Snyder and his chief of staff and the health director trying to stop news of this deadly bacteria from going public weeks before his re-election for governor. And at this time, Jen, he was also thinking about running for president. Obviously, you have to get reelected as governor to then have a chance to run for president. This was before Trump announced. So we also, in that story, maybe you could talk about this element, we found evidence not just of the phone calls that prosecutors concluded was about Legionella and covering that up. We found notes from a meeting that seemed to indicate in writing the governor had been notified about Legionella a year and a half earlier. Can you kind of talk about that, Jen, and remind people those meeting notes?
I was doing something else while you were talking about that, so I don't know which meeting notes in particular you're talking about, but there was a lot of evidence that Governor Rick Snyder, in fact, knew about or had plenty of opportunity to know about exactly what was going on when it came to the water being unsafe. So if you think about that time, again, this was 7 years ago. The water switch happened April 25th, 2014, which a lot of people don't realize that it's been 7 years. So people in the community in this, I will emphasize, this majority Black, poor community were reporting rashes, a variety of symptoms. And so there were complaints being called in, and there was a lot of opportunity for this news to have reached the top. There was plenty of cause for this news to have reached the top. A lot of people know of the water crisis for lead, but a lot of people don't realize Legionella, which is what Jordan was talking about. And Legionella, lead is extremely damaging and horrible, and it can take upwards of 5 years for its full effects to start to show up. Legionella is often kind of conflated or confused with pneumonia. So some of the symptoms are similar. And with this corrosive water, when they switched, we think they switched for nefarious reasons, for reasons of profit, for reasons of privatizing. When they switched, this water corroded the elements that would normally kind of protect against an overgrowth of Legionella. So this bacteria went all over the place through people's water, grew. It also takes a very long time for water in Flint to reach the towers to people's homes, like much longer than it's supposed to take. So there's reporting out of PBS that many more people died of Legionnaire's disease than was officially kind of reported. And so a lot was kept under wraps by the Snyder operation, let's call it, including memos that showed or would have showed that this was in fact, on the agenda to talk about. There are plenty of clues along the way that former Governor Rick Snyder knew a hell of a lot more about what was happening in Flint than he admitted to. And in fact, many months before he said in Congress. And he also gave different answers depending on where he was about when he first learned about Legionnaires, the Legionnaires crisis. So that's kind of the reporting that we had before, or that's kind of the background. But when we talk about the clues that he knew and his cronies knew, and by cronies, I mean like mob boss style cronies in certain cases. There is a lot of evidence that they knew what was going on, and our reporting in January is part of that. So that's what Jordan was getting at there, and that was also released in The Intercept. So now if you want to talk more about that, about the phone call, the flurry of phone calls.
Yeah, so 310 people watching. Guys, this is the biggest story of government corruption of this century. Smash the goddamn like button if you haven't. Share this live stream. Create your own social media post telling people this is a must watch. So I want to be clear on a few things before we get to like this specific bombshell story. What Jenn means by clues that they clearly knew. To be clear, we have exposed that they knew people were drinking toxic water. They knew this deadly bacteria cases were skyrocketing. And not only did they didn't do anything to alert the public, they made efforts to hide it from the public. So it's not just that they knew, they chose, instead of stepping in, and frankly, they could have been viewed as heroes. Hey, we made a mistake, but we're shutting this down right now to avoid any further health problems. They knowingly let people keep drinking the water, including, thousands and thousands of children. And we know what happened. So ironically, the next day after we broke that story in January for The Intercept, the Michigan Attorney General, Dana Nessel, a Democrat, and her team announced charges against Governor Snyder, a misdemeanor. They charged him with a misdemeanor of willful neglect of duty, which poses a $1,000 fine and potentially 1 year in prison. So Jenn and I, other officials were charged with far more serious crimes, including Snyder's top advisor and fixer, his self-described fixer. I call him his henchman. So the question was, wait a minute. Jenn and I said, if the original investigation, because there was a 3-year investigation under the previous attorney general, and once the Democratic attorney general came in, she cleaned house, she fired everybody and restarted the investigation. Part of that January reporting that we were just talking about that got Snyder's phone logs, we discovered that the original prosecution was going to charge way more than a misdemeanor. The original prosecution, a 3-year investigation, was going to charge Snyder with willful neglect of duty, which is that misdemeanor, with misconduct in office. So those two they had decided to charge him with, and they were building a case. They weren't ready to charge it. They were building a case to charge him with involuntary manslaughter, the governor of Michigan, with involuntary manslaughter. So Jenn and I were looking at ourselves and said, wait a minute, we've been covering this for 5 years. We know, not to pat ourselves on the back, we know a lot. How is it that they're only charging the governor with a misdemeanor when the previous investigation was building towards involuntary manslaughter? That's a big discrepancy, which made us keep digging. We kept digging. And by the way, it's not very profitable to spend all your time digging instead of doing clickbaity live streams. But we in the background, while doing live streams daily, while taking trips on other stories, were digging through this story. And what we found, and this begins this story, was it wasn't just Governor Snyder. top officials in the Snyder administration had their phones wiped, meaning erased, shortly before the launch of the Flint criminal investigation. In other cases, health department officials, their phones weren't completely erased. They were just basically, shall we say, altered with all the text messages from 2014 all the way through October 2015, which is when Flint was on the Flint River, April 2014 through October 2015, for some of the top officials in the state health department, including Dr. Eden Wells, the former chief medical executive of Michigan, including Tim Becker, who was the deputy director, so the number 2 at the health department. There was no messages on their phone for all of 2014, all the way to October 2015. Magically, the first messages that appeared were after October 2015. Jenn, this is kind of important because, frankly, this is a digital crime that investigators are investigating. It's not like, it's a bank robbery. Investigators would have to investigate communications between health department officials, environmental department officials, Governor Snyder's administration. So can you explain to the audience, what is the significance? Oh, I left out not only the health department, the governor's press secretary, Sarah Werfel. So, administrations have a whole communications team, communications director, press secretary. The press secretary basically speaks on behalf of the governor. So there's a lot of communication between a governor, a president, and their press secretary. She left her role in November 2015. So right after Governor Snyder announced for the first time, yes, there's alarming lead levels. She told prosecutors, let me read it for you. Colin, if you could bring this up. Sarah Werfel, Snyder's press secretary during the water crisis in 2014 through fall 2015, told Flood, who was the Flint special prosecutor, kind of like the Robert Mueller of Flint, that her phone was wiped when she left her job at the end of November 2015, after a civil suit was filed against the Snyder administration and only a month before the launch of the Flint criminal investigation. The special counsel asked Snyder's press secretary, do you have text messages from 2015 currently on your phone? She said, no. So when I left the governor's office, everything got wiped. I mean, when I turned in my phone, it got wiped, she told him. Werfel, who kept her state cell phone number when she left her government job, said she didn't recall if she had been asked to hand in her phone at any other time in 2015 prior to leaving her job in November. She also said she didn't think that she had an iCloud backup on her phone. When we asked her for comment, she said, not sure what you're referring to. Please share if there's a specific document or item. We then shared her direct quote. She didn't respond. A former official with the Michigan Department of Technology, Management, and Budget, who worked for the state during the Flint water crisis and was involved with state data preservation, that's what keeping phone data, told The Intercept that is not standard. The governor's press secretary basically having her phone deleted. There are retention schedules that every agency, including the governor's office, is supposed to adhere to. But with potential litigation looming, so by November 2015, there was already litigation. There was a major civil suit filed against the Snyder administration by Flint residents, and there was significant chatter about a criminal investigation coming. But with potential litigation looming, the former state official, it should have been held indefinitely. So, Jenn, I want to zero home for the audience. Why is this such a bombshell?
Well, I think to again bring people back, because I know this is a lot of information for people to kind of wrap their heads around. The story we broke in January talked about some more of these clues that the Snyder administration knew all along how dangerous the water was, far before Snyder admitted it. And so that reporting showed that there was a flurry of phone calls at crucial points between folks that didn't normally communicate in such a flurry. So there's that information to kind of keep in your mind as we fast forward to this reporting. And as Jordan said, you know, if you have these state officials who communicate most likely very regularly with one another, with the governor. A lot of these folks would have direct lines to the governor, and would have direct lines with those who also would have alerted them about what was happening in Flint. So when you all of a sudden find out, as the former prosecution team did, according to these documents we obtained, that these messages are all gone. You know, these phones are wiped. This stuff is gone. So this is during crucial moments in the timeline that these messages are gone, wiped, clean, altered, backups not found or not known about. So this is a huge clue. It's more than a clue. It's a huge smoking gun that kind of this is how the Snyder administration seemed to operate, and this is also part of what our story shows, is that not only were these phones wiped, but also the Snyder administration outright refused to hand over key documents to the prosecution team. And
when we say the Snyder administration, we mean Governor Snyder himself.
Indeed. And also, yeah, so Governor Snyder himself was supposed to hand over documents, and it's a lot of back and forth from the prosecution team trying to get these key documents. And they came back, these documents came back altered or not there, or they would send things that were completely unrelated. So it's kind of, it seemed like a sabotage of the prosecution being able to find direct information that pointed to the Snyder administration knowing what was going on. But when you combine these things, the flurry of phone calls between key figures at certain points in the timeline, deleted messages among or on folks' phones who would have been communicating most likely about this, and the fact that they refused to hand over key documents to the prosecution team, even though they were supposed to. So there are a lot of Flint water crisis document dumps out there, and they've actually taken down a lot of them. But they did release, you know, some of Snyder's emails, documents from the Michigan State Police Department, documents from the IT department, from the Department of Health. But there's a lot of evidence out there that the process was kind of directed by those surrounding Governor Snyder, and in order to like not hand over key documents, not just from Governor Snyder himself, but potentially from other departments as well. And also some direct involvement in, so each department was supposed to create timelines of when they knew things, when they did things. And so there's evidence that we show in our story as well that these timelines were, they corroborated on them, collaborated on them with some potential direction from above. So there's a lot here. And I think it's also important to think about why would they want to do this? You know, why would Governor Snyder have an interest in not announcing that there was a problem with the water back then? Well, there were rumors and more that he planned to run for president. He also was taking some key trips overseas at that time to try to bring business to Michigan that was worth billions of dollars. And his whole spiel, his whole PR spin was that Michigan is doing great. I've totally turned it around. It's amazing. This is a great place for business. So if he has to say, oh, wait, except for the water is killing a majority Black poor city, that's not a great seller. So it was in his best interest, potentially, to sweep this all under the rug.
Absolutely.
At the cost of people's lives.
And I think this is really important, and we're going to get into further details of the story. But all of this that we're breaking, it could have been revealed many years ago. I mean, a lot of this information happened years ago. But because, and I think people think we just bash the corporate media to bash the corporate media. But there's real life consequences in corporate media covering things up. We brought this information, and we're about to get to more details. Smash that like button, almost 400 people watching. We brought these details to outlets like the Detroit Free Press, to the Detroit News, to the Flint Journal, to the New York Times, to the Washington Post, to CNN, to MSNBC, to BuzzFeed, to the Daily Beast, to Rolling Stone. I could go on and on and on. And some of them initially expressed interest and then moonwalked. The Detroit Free Press, I literally met with their editor in a parking lot after I drove to Michigan 9 hours during a pandemic. We handed him a lot of this evidence. He said to me, and I quote, "Yeah, we regret not doing more on Flint." Looked at the evidence, said, "You got a lot here." And then 3 days later told me, "Yeah, we're going to have to pass." I mean, I'm not going to get into so many examples, but there's a lot of examples of things like that happening. So it's not just that how was Governor Snyder and his administration able to cover this up? Well, you can't cover things up. You can cover things up if no one's looking. That's how government cover-ups work. That's how corporate cover-ups work. That's how government corruption and corporate corruption works. If the media not only is lazy and doesn't look into it, but then when the people who work hard and find it go to the media, they refuse to cover it. I mean, our tweet's been up, Jen, for a couple hours now. We got, I think, almost 400 retweets. I haven't seen one mainstream media outlet cover this yet. So we'll get back into all of that. So
I want to answer a couple of questions before we totally move on. And also thank you guys for the super chats. A couple of them have already fallen off the screen, but we really appreciate you. Thank you. Thank you for your support. Presence says, maybe you guys could use a lead-in song for this story, Sabotage by the Beastie Boys. I think that's a great suggestion. Thank you, Presence. Dana, I can't find it, but Dana asks if Sarah Werfel is related to Brad Werfel. Yes, she is. They're married.
Husband and wife.
So, and there were other questions as well, but we'll have time for Q&A at the end, and we also have a special guest. So definitely smash the like button, share this stream, and help get the word out as we keep talking about this.
So I want to drill into more specifics of the story because there's so many. Honestly, this story could have been done in 4 different stories, but we decided to just do it as one. So Colin, if you could bring it up. Let's start with the Michigan.
Jordan, you have water. Why don't you go get water?
Yeah, I have water.
Okay.
Don't worry about it. The Michigan Department of Health, again, under the Snyder administration, presumably the governor oversaw and is responsible for his departments. Dr. Eden Wells became Michigan's chief medical executive in May 2015. By then, the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services had been aware for at least 7 months of a significant increase in the deadly waterborne Legionnaire's disease throughout Flint. And we previously talked to you about what Legionnaire's is. But when investigators obtained access to Wells' phones, they discovered something unusual. Quote, for Dr. Wells' phone, the earliest message is from November 12th, 2015. Then Flint Special Prosecutor Todd Flood wrote in a subpoena petition obtained by The Intercept. During the key period that investigators were probing, no messages were found. And this goes on to talk about that she was charged. Dr. Eden Wells was charged for involuntary manslaughter for her role in the water crisis. Other searches turned up similar results. The phone of Tim Becker, MDHHS's, so the health department's chief deputy director, had no messages on it prior to April 2016. So that's beyond just the 2014 to 2015 period that Flint used the Flint River. His messages mysteriously disappeared all the way up to January January, April 2016. Becker testified to having first asked questions about Flint's Legionella outbreak in January 2015. Well, how do we know that testimony is true if we don't have access to any of his messages? Moving on, Patricia McCain, an epidemiologist with the health department, who testified she was pressured to lie by Dr. Eden Wells about elevated blood lead levels in Flint's children. Imagine that. The chief medical executive was pressuring epidemiologists to fudge the numbers, hide the numbers of children's elevated blood levels. McCain's phone only had 4 text messages on her phone from 2015 and 7 messages total. Fellow epidemiologist Sarah Lyon Callow, she was the director of the state's Bureau of Epidemiology and Population Health. There was no messages prior to June 2016 on her phone. Quote, again, for some strange reason, the earliest text message in time on her device begins June 20th, 2016. Wesley Priam, manager of the state health department's Lead and Healthy Homes program. So there was a lead crisis. He's the manager of the Lead and Healthy Homes program. No messages on his phone. 1 text messages found on his phone from January 22nd, 2016. So you might be wondering, all right, who are these officials? Why do these time periods matter? Imagine for a second that how the media would respond, the corporate media would respond. I will drink water. It's not COVID, by the way. It's asthma.
Caused by COVID.
Caused by COVID.
That he had last March 2020.
Yeah. Imagine for a second if the corporate media caught wind of, Trump doesn't really put anything right in, but let's say Trump's chief of staff, Trump's health department advisors, key health officials in the Trump administration. Imagine if the corporate media caught wind that all of their messages from January 2020, February 2020, March 2020 didn't exist. Emails were deleted, phone calls, text messages were deleted. No communication existed prior to when news of the coronavirus came out. Can you imagine? Rightly so, by the way. It would be wall-to-wall coverage on every station, every outlet. This is a cover-up. They deleted their emails. They deleted their text messages. This is basically the same thing, only 5 or 6 years earlier. Not a deadly airborne illness, but a deadly waterborne illness. And later on, lead contamination, lead poisoning. That's what we're talking about here. Like, they basically deleted the evidence. As a journalist, I'll say potential evidence, because you always want to be fair. But I don't know. Jen, if I'm not trying to hide something, I generally don't delete all my text messages or erase my phone from the key period that Flint used the Flint River.
Right. And certainly multiple people, wouldn't do that. Maybe you could say like, okay, this one person like regularly, clears her messages out or whatever, which shouldn't happen, by the way, because they work for the government and it's a government device. They're supposed to like retain those anyway. But even if you could argue that this many, no, that doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make any sense. And, not to mention that would need, I think you mentioned earlier, probably at the top of the show, that there was clear need to retain this information. There was litigation going on. So for it to be gone on multiple phones completely, it makes no sense.
And I'll also reiterate something to those that maybe came in late and keep sharing this live stream, keep pressing the like button, all that. It's not just the top health officials. One of Governor Snyder's top officials, his press secretary, her phone was deleted, erased, right when she left office in November 2015, a month and a half before a criminal investigation was launched. Why is this super important? Why is this super important? In fairness to her, the press secretary, she might have not committed any crimes, but the whole investigation, potential charges against a governor or anyone, is about were they notified and when were they notified? Snyder told Congress he only learned of the Legionella outbreak in January 2016. Well, wouldn't it be important to be able to see his communications with his press secretary, whether it be the text messages, if there were any, or the phone log? Because it's not just the text messages, it's the phone history to see when were they talking on the phone? Was there rapid increases in their discussions on the phone? So all of these things are very important because that's one of Snyder's top officials who leaves pretty much right before a criminal investigation is launched. But there's more. And by the way, this kind of gave me a tickle, Jen. Colin, if you could go to this part. Where is the health department's response? Don't care. Spokesperson. Hold on, gotta find it. Oh, here we go. On the lack of phone messages from top MDHHS officials, so health department officials, a department spokesperson told The Intercept via email, quote, "The department does not care to comment other than to say that the department always cooperates with the Attorney General's office in providing anything that office has asked for during its Flint water investigation." Let me repeat that. The department does not care to comment when asked why were phones erased? Why were a year and a half's worth of text messages erased? We do not care to comment. Jen, I would never, ever borrow from George W. Bush. But in this case, I have to. That's about as close to a journalistic, we got him, as it gets. I mean, they're not even like, they're not declining comment, even though technically that is declining comment. Usually they say, we decline comment. They're not giving you spin or BS. They're just saying, yeah, we kind of don't want to talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's I think it's okay. You can borrow from GW in that instance. It's pretty striking, I think, that the way that they phrased that, and that they didn't just give the normal, the normal answer. Yeah, I think there's no real way around it. It's pretty, again, it's striking.
So here we have the governor's press secretary. Her phone's totally erased. Here we have top officials with the health department. Their phones have no messages on them from the entire period Flint was on the Flint River. And by the way, another reason that's important, it's not like the health department and the governor's office weren't aware there were complaints. There were complaints coming in as soon as 3 weeks after they switched to the Flint River in 2014. So this period Flint was on the Flint River, the Snyder administration was aware of the complaints. They were talking about the complaints. So having no messages on people's phone, again, this is a digital crime. You would find evidence through email, through phones, all that is very, 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 very alarming and suspect. But I want to move on because there's even, I mean, it just gets worse and worse. There's also at least circumstantial evidence that officials with the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality, the environmental department, their phones were wiped. At least it looks that way. Colin, if you could show this part. The information concerning the missing data was detailed by the investigators in a petition for the issuance of a subpoena obtained by The Intercept. Flint Special Prosecutor Flood, who was appointed by then Michigan Attorney General Bill Schuette in 2016 to carry out the original Flint water investigation, sought to interview Jim Fick, a state IT official with the Department of Technology Management and Budget. Though the petition was never filed, its contents are supported by the accounts of multiple sources familiar with the investigation, as well as transcripts of interviews reviewed by The Intercept. Flood did not respond to our request for comments. In the subpoena petition, Flood referenced the top health department officials from who he had recently obtained phone data. 4 out of the 5 phones had no records prior to October 2015. And you know what else? Again, what else happened in October 2015? Snyder held a press conference in Flint, finally admitting the water was toxic, alarming lead levels, and we're switching Flint off the Flint River. So Flood also described an email that he and his criminal team received in May 2016 from Jim Henry, who was a supervisor with the Genesee County Health Department. Flint is part of Genesee County. Henry knew Fick, the IT official, through their children's hockey team. In Henry's email, obtained by The Intercept, he wrote, Jim Fick, the IT official, explained to me that several MDEQ, environmental officials, their phones were returned to his office, quote, wiped clean about the same time of George's email below. So, IT official tells the county health official, environmental officials' phones were dumped off to his office, wiped clean. The George that he was referring to was George Christian, who served as the environmental department's lab director involved with Flint's water, lead, and copper testing data that Flint water investigators found environmental officials had, quote, conspired to alter in order to bury the true lead levels that showed Flint's water was toxic. Again, beyond rampant corruption and cover-ups, deadly cover-ups, fudging numbers so you wouldn't have to take action if you could fudge the numbers low enough that the lead levels don't go past what the EPA allows. This is the important part. Soon after Snyder's October 2015 press conference announcing that Flint's water was toxic, Christian was named the Environmental Department's Flint Action Coordinator. Weeks later, on October 19th, 2015, State Environmental Director Dan Wyant admitted that the State Environmental Department had, I should say, fucked up. There's erred, but I'll say fucked up when it failed to treat Flint's water with corrosion control chemicals that prevent lead from leaching off old distribution pipes. Folks, all of our pipes underneath us are 75 to 100 years old. All major cities add chemicals that basically stop the age-old pipes with lead in them, the lead from leaching off. But the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality, supposedly the experts, decided, nah, we don't need them. This is Flint. Poor people, we'll just skip out on that. So one day after the environmental director publicly acknowledged that the department messed up, Christian sends an email to colleagues announcing he had a new cell phone and a new number. So the top state environmental official who oversees the testing, Snyder holds a press conference announcing Flint's high lead levels. This official is then made the Flint Action Coordinator from the environmental department, and he gets a new phone and a new number. Henry, the county health official, told prosecutors that Fick, the IT official who told Henry about all these phones being dumped off, quote, wiped clean, Fick allegedly told Henry it was odd to have received several working phones that were wiped clean and no information could be retrieved. The timing of this was soon after the governor's press conference on the 8th. So, Jen, I'm a journalist. I know you're supposed to feign neutrality and all this. That's about as much of a smoking gun as you're going to find. The governor holds a press conference, finally admitting what the residents of Flint had been screaming for a year and a half, that the water is toxic. We're getting off the Flint River. Right after that, this guy, this lab director who is involved heavily with the lead testing that investigators found they screwed with the data, they altered it. He's made a new position and given a new phone and a new number. And oh, by the way, around this time, the state IT official allegedly told this health official, yeah, other environmental department officials, their phones were dropped off, wiped clean. Just so happens, soon after the governor's announcement, by the way, around the time, there's calls for a federal investigation. There's calls for an attorney general's investigation in Michigan. There's a civil suit coming. I don't know. That doesn't seem like a coinky-dink to me. To be fair, I just want to read George Christensen's statement because he did get back to us. Christian, who was the MDEQ official who got the new phone and the new number, told The Intercept in an email that he got a new phone shortly after Snyder's press conference because of, quote, my new assignment as the Flint Action Plan coordinator. Quote, I needed a phone that was dedicated to that job so that the lab could get their phone back and be used by the acting lab director. Many parties had that phone number as a contact for the lab, and if I recall correctly, the number was also used for emergency response efforts. As such,
my God, sorry everyone. Did you hear that thunder?
Yeah. As such, it was only logical that I be issued a new phone and a new number. In addition, the old phone was a flip phone that had very limited functionality, and a smartphone was much better suited to handle the needs of the Flint assignment. So I'm not going to get into crazy detail. I mean, this on its face is kind of laughable. He basically talks as if there was one phone for the whole lab in state government. I mean, that's just, I don't really think that's believable. So because there was only one phone, I was switching out of that position. So I had to give the one phone for the whole lab, or the one number for the whole lab, back to, readers could decide if they believe that. But Jenn, Flood finished out that subpoena, basically saying, we believe the contents of the health department officials' phones, meaning the missing messages from the health department officials, no messages before October 2015, have given credence to the possibility that what the IT official told the health official may have occurred, meaning October 2015. They're finding no messages before October 2015 on health department officials' phones, and the criminal investigation is tipped off that the IT official received all these phones from environmental officials in the same exact month, soon after Governor Snyder's press conference, erased, basically. And I want to be clear, again, common sense, Jenn, I think we reached out to the IT official, Jim Fick, and Jim Henry. I mean, I spent a day trying to get Jim Henry's contact because he's moved on to another department. I think I reached out between the both of them at least 10 to 15 times. They would not respond. If I put the word in allegedly because it's journalistically what you do, but I don't know if if this is all made up, if the IT official did not tell Jim Henry that, if the IT official did not tell anyone that environmental department phones were dumped off, quote, wiped clean, I think he'd want to deny that, don't you think?
Of course, I think so. And I think, there's plenty of reason to believe that this indeed was the case. So, and that's the thing, is this reporting is very airtight. It has taken a long time to come out because we wanted that to be the case, and it's gone through several steps in the process to make sure.
Nice way of putting it.
Yeah, to make sure that everything that we're reporting is as accurate as possible, and phrased, to show what we know for sure, what is, alleged, etc. So yeah, I think this isn't really something you can dance around if you're one of the folks in this story. I mean, that's part of journalistic practices, reaching out to everybody of note in the story, or who would have something to say, or who you want to be able to give a response. That's responsible reporting. And, certain folks don't comment. You don't hear back from them. Others you do, as we talked about with the health department, and they give you kind of interesting answers that are that say a lot without saying a lot. So yeah, I really think that there's no way to dance around this. And yeah, I think it's true that thunder was very symbolic. It happened at the right moment.
Why, Colin, if you could keep going in this section, why there is at least some evidence that environmental officials, and why this is important, let me just, obviously the buck stops with the governor, but the two departments that were instrumental and the go-tos for this was the environmental department and the health department. So that's why it's important. All these phones are mysteriously erased, or there's no messages. There is at least one environmental department official that we know he was asked to hand in his phone in October 2015. Unfortunately, that person is dead now, so obviously we couldn't ask him to comment. But I want to read this because it shows you something's not right here. At least one high-level MDEQ official, environmental department official, was asked to hand in his state-issued phone in the same October 2015 period that Fick, the IT official, allegedly received several wiped clean phones. Documents obtained by The Intercept reveal. In a confidential 2016 interview, Jim Saigo, who was the environmental department's deputy director, so the number two, told Flood, the special prosecutor, that sometime in October 2015, he was asked to give his phone to Mary Beth Thielen, the administrative assistant to the environmental department director. Quote, "I don't know where they took it or what they did with it," Saigo told Flood in a confidential interview, adding that he believed they were taking his phone to have it imaged. Imaged means generally you're given your phone for possible litigation. They copy what's on it and then give you your phone back. When Flood asked him if he received his phone back after handing it in, Saigo answered no. He did not specify whether he was given a new phone. Saigo, who died in 2018, 8 months after he testified in the pretrial for Dr. Eden Wells over Flint, was an MDEQ official who investigators questioned to find out what and when Wyant and Snyder knew about Flint's Legionnaires outbreak. The Department of Management, Technology, and Budget, in response to these wiped clean phones, delivered kind of a word salad. I'm not even going to bother get into it, but you could read it, saying a whole lot of nothing. Interestingly enough,
the DTMB is the IT department, just so everybody knows. I know there's a lot of acronyms going on.
Jen, you know how I stressed the health department's lack of comment was striking? Indeed. This one was also striking. So a spokesperson for MDEQ, the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality, which is now called the Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy, pointed to the previous Snyder administration. Quote, "The current administration," that would be Governor Gretchen Whitmer, "is neither in a position to confirm the actions of nor speculate on the motives of employees and former employees that occurred 6 years ago." That's about as much wasn't us as it gets. I mean, in a very lawyered up way, they definitely got in the dig on the motives of the previous administration.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I don't really have it speaks for itself, to be honest.
Right.
Yeah.
So here you have the health department won't comment, or we don't care to comment, and the environmental department basically says, well, this was under a previous administration. We can't really speculate on why they did this. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, usually I'm used to government officials spinning and corporations spinning. It's really rare to get these kind of comments which kind of are either of the variety of you got us or they did it, not us. But that's what we have here. That's what we have. I want to get into something else here, and that is the role of Governor Snyder's top advisor. Jen, have you watched any mob movies?
Of course. Who hasn't?
So in mafia vernacular, there's something called the consigliere. That's my Italian accent. And the consigliere...
That's not very good. Not very good Italian.
The consigliere is kind of like the mob boss's henchman who kind of does the dirty work, you know? Kind of gets his hands a little bloody. So Rick Snyder's political consigliere was a guy named Richard Baird. Richard Baird, who in January was charged with obstruction of justice, extortion, perjury, and misconduct in office for his role in the Flint water crisis.
I should add, some of our reporting that directly shed light on some of those things. So we can't say that our reporting is responsible, but, you know.
Actually,
you can
we
make
can
your own
for one
conclusion.
of them. We can for one of them. So for those that remember, we broke a story for Vice in January in 2020 about Mr. Baird, Snyder's go-to advisor and best friend, by the way. He was going around offering payoffs to Flint residents who were sick to get them to shut up and not talk to the media. And he was using state money for that. So one of his charges was misconduct in office, and attached to that was misusing state funds. And that, I firmly believe, that was attached to one of the cases we exposed, which was the governor's right-hand man offering a payoff to a sick Flint man to get him to stop raising hell and getting media attention. So I firmly believe the report we did for Vice led to one of his charges. But putting that
I also
aside,
believe that, but we can't say for sure.
okay, that's fine. Jen, do you want to read this Rich Baird part?
Sure.
So,
Let's give it a read. You're talking about where do you want to start? When Baird gave the governor his first job out of college?
Hold on, let me find it. So start with, beyond the questions arising from the phone data, The Intercept uncovered more details behind multiple investigations that Snyder initiated into the Flint water crisis.
Alrighty. So
I feel like I'm at the Jewish Passover table, and like I'm not actually reading the Haggadah, and then they call my name to say something, and I have to ask, what page are we on? Because it's hard to keep track. The story's so long.
Yeah, the story's long. It's very involved. I feel yeah. So just so you guys remember, we've definitely reported on Baird before. As we just talked about, have in your mind this like right-hand man gonna get anything and everything done for my man, the governor. So that's who this guy is. Beyond the questions arising from the phone data, The Intercept uncovered more details behind multiple internal investigations that Snyder initiated into the Flint water crisis. And this is crazy, guys, so buckle up if it wasn't crazy enough. One of the investigations, led by the Michigan State Police to investigate MDEQ's culpability for the water crisis, was launched on the same day that Schuette announced Flood as the Flint Criminal Investigations Special Counsel in January 2016. The other Snyder-launched investigation was led by the State Auditor General and Inspector General investigating MDHHS's role in the water crisis. So this essentially, we have like the real investigation led by Todd Flood. This was the previous investigation team that worked for 3 years before Gretchen Whitmer's admin got in and they were all kicked out. So what Snyder is doing, what we're talking about here, is launching parallel investigations right alongside the real investigation. Why would he want to do that? Why would he be launching, his own side investigations? Seems weird, right? So we go on to say, the other Snyder-launched investigation, I already read that part, in a sharply worded May 25th, 2016 letter Schuette sent to Snyder, the Attorney General ridiculed the investigations, again, the side investigations that Snyder got going, along with Baird, arguing that they have compromised the ongoing criminal investigation and may effectively be an obstruction of justice. After Schuette's letter demanding that Snyder cease his own Flint investigations, the governor announced a halt to them. So here's more about Baird. Richard Baird was the point person for Snyder who engineered the state police and auditor general, inspector general investigations. Multiple sources familiar told us. With this knowledge in mind, Schuette copied Baird on the letter to the governor, along with Snyder's private attorney, chief legal counsel, and chief of staff. So as we mentioned in January, this past January, under the new prosecution team, Baird was charged with obstruction of justice, misconduct in office, perjury, and extortion for his role in the Flint water crisis. So again, we have these side investigations. Now think about why someone would want to do that. If someone is like, oh, shoot, I'm being investigated under this for real prosecution team, especially if someone like Todd Flood, who's been brought in he's brought in as a special prosecutor. So Snyder doesn't know where this is going to go. So if he is going to start these side investigations, do you think that these side investigations are going to go in his favor or not? So here is kind of what.
Can I add something? It's not only that obviously the investigations are, just show investigations, but when you launch investigations of your own during a criminal investigation, that can produce legal issues for the actual criminal investigation. Because if Snyder's using the Michigan State Police, by the way, for one of these investigations, if they interview certain officials that are then going to be interviewed by the criminal investigators, basically it muddies the water so that the criminal investigators will have testimonial issues. I learned that from several lawyers. So it wasn't just to kind of have this PR victory where Snyder could say, oh, we launched our own internal investigations. Obviously they'll pick a fall guy or a gal, but basically say, overall, there was nothing nefarious here. It would basically interfere with the criminal investigation and make it more difficult to use certain statements from interviews that were officials that were interviewed with the fake Snyder investigation.
Yeah, because the prosecution team has specific questions in mind they want to ask. They have a specific timeline of when they want to ask these questions. And you have to think as a prosecutor, an investigator, whoever, about when do you want people to know that you're looking into X, Y, Z, or this aspect or that aspect. And so if there's a side investigation going on initiated by someone that you are investigating, which it wasn't, known that Snyder was under investigation at this point, it really causes a problem. So we go on in this article. Of course, Baird did not respond to our request for comment. We go on to say the state police investigations report obtained by The Intercept minimized MDEQ, again, that's the environmental department, their culpability in the water crisis. Imagine that. In the report, Michigan State Police Lieutenant Lisa Risch wrote that MDEQ employees she interviewed denied any wrongdoing.
Gee.
And wow, what a great evidence. And claimed that they had followed federal drinking water regulations while making decisions related to Flint's water. The Michigan State Police interviewed 11 MDEQ officials, 4 of whom ended up being charged by Schuette as part of the Flint water criminal investigation. So here's an important part of this MSP report. In one example, Risch wrote that MDEQ supervisor Stephen Bush merely made a misstatement when he falsely told concerned Environmental Protection Agency officials that Flint had an optimized corrosion control program in February 2015. So this is really a key point for the water crisis in general, is that they did not, when they switched over to the Flint River from the Detroit water, they did not use the right corrosion control. This is why the water, it was so corrosive, because it didn't have the corrosion control, that it loosened the lead and a bunch of crap into the water. Because it did not have corrosion control. So MDEQ supervisor Stephen Bush, the truth is that he falsely told EPA that they had an optimized corrosion control program, but this lieutenant for the MSP, the Michigan State Police, Snyder Baird initiated investigation, called it a misstatement, when in fact it was a flat out falsehood.
Absolutely. And I also think, sorry, have people reaching out to me on the story.
No worries. Yeah, folks, we need to get this story out to everybody.
I also think this is important because we have been talking a whole lot in this country for the last, I'd say the last decade, but especially since George Floyd, about not only police brutality, but police corruption, right? And politicians' connections to the police department. Well, this is, you're literally having the Michigan State Police investigate the governor and the state environmental department. That's as much as the inmates running the asylum or the inmates investigating themselves. Like, why would the Michigan State Police, which serves at Snyder's pleasure, works for the governor, just like the police departments work for a mayor, why would anyone think it's credible for the Michigan State Police, who, by the way, have their own corruption problems, to investigate the environmental department? It's preposterous on its face. The other element that I think is important here is the Attorney General of Michigan at that time. And this, I don't want to confuse people, so follow with me. And if you have questions, ask. So the Attorney General of Michigan at that time was a Republican. His name was Bill Schuette. And he was about to run for governor to replace Rick Snyder, who was finishing his term. So he was overseeing the criminal investigation while on the other side running as a Republican to replace Rick Snyder. So there was an inherent conflict of interest, a major conflict of interest in the Attorney General, because technically there was a special prosecutor who was supposed to be independent from the Attorney General. We found out that was not the case at all. The Attorney General was, basically running the whole thing. The Attorney General would not let the criminal prosecution, particularly the special prosecutor, do things like issue a search warrant on Governor Snyder. Like, think about it. If you're running a criminal investigation, normally you don't ask the potential criminal or the subject that you're targeting, you don't ask their lawyers kindly to provide you the evidence. I've spoken with a lot of lawyers about this. You take that shit. You seize the devices. You seize their cell phones. You seize their laptops. You seize whatever. The Attorney General of Michigan would not allow them to do that. Actually, in the story, we have a source who says Flood's hands were tied, meaning the special prosecutor's hands were tied. Snyder wouldn't honor subpoenas. He wouldn't hand over documents, but the Attorney General would not let Flood issue a search warrant. He made the special prosecutor go back and forth for 3 years with Snyder's lawyer. Snyder's lawyer, and this, we'll get into that later, the other part of this story, Snyder wouldn't hand over key documents. Like, it's not like little things like he didn't want to hand over his Post-it notes. He wouldn't hand over to prosecutors his daily briefings. Well, I don't know. If I'm investigating, what and when did the governor know? Wouldn't I want to see what was he being told? What was the information he was getting every day? He would not hand over his daily briefings from September 2014, October 2014, key parts of 2015 that are crucial to know. What was he being told? What information was he being briefed on at crucial times in the Flint water crisis? So we'll get into all that later, but I want to bring in Melissa Mays.
Yay.
Who has been on with us many times. Melissa
Colin, can you put her in the middle?
Yes, Melissa in the middle. So
Okay, Melissa. Everyone say welcome to Melissa.
Melissa, I'm just going to start with, because you know I'm long-winded.
Imagine.
I think you've read the story. Your thoughts? Oh, I should be clear. Melissa, her children were made sick from this water. Melissa's health has gone to hell in a handbasket. She has fought along with other residents now for 6-7 years, basically to get this information out. But their local media, the Michigan media, the national media, has basically only contacted them on anniversaries of the water crisis. So Melissa has a personal stake in this, both her health, her family's health, as well as, frankly, her life was destroyed.
Absolutely. I mean, there's 100,000 of us that are immunocompromised. Things are altered. I mean, even if you travel, you find that your skin is far more sensitive when you take a shower. You blister up. You get sick to your stomach if you try to drink the water with a filter. People still aren't drinking it through their regular, tap, because we know better. We know that the corroded infrastructure is still delivering us our water, no matter how hard we fight. And when we bring these things up, we get told that, you're just scared. You're just fearful. You're just ignorant people, which has basically been the same, spiel that we've received since people started complaining with discolored water, starting in 2014, right after the water switched to the Flint River. So, we're still getting told the same thing. Oh, no, trust us. We're the experts. These, by the way, are the same experts that are hiding information, covering it up, lying to our faces, and who switched the water in the first place. But yet nobody will take responsibility for their actions. And any kind of accountability that we've been able to get has been through the courts. And that's pretty sad, because we're human beings. We're innocent victims in all of this. And we've had to fight harder than most anybody just to get answers. And so reading the article, part of me wishes I was surprised, but they've been lying to us since day one. And so now with them dragging this out over 7 years, we're fairly certain they're going to continue to lie, because it's worked for them somewhat this whole time, because they would like to play hot potato with the truth, blame this person, blame that person, kick out anybody who got close to the truth, getting rid of special investigators, special prosecutors, anybody that questioned authority, going after residents, people who, I got sued for $3 million for saying that the water still isn't fixed. Which is common knowledge and common sense, because the pipes are still in the ground delivering us this water. I mean, again, you can put God's perfect spring water through these pipes, but they're still corroded, they're damaged, they're still rupturing in the streets. I took pictures of a block from my house where the mains keep rupturing and flooding. And so then they have to run the hydrants, which of course means my water bill is going to go up, because who do you think is paying for that? So yeah, we're still paying highest rates in the United States for water we can't use. And still nobody will step up and say, you know what? We're going to replace all the plumbing in your homes. We're going to replace the damaged mains and finish up the rest of these service lines we had to sue for, because what was done to you was wrong. You know, your government did this to you and has lied to you. And by the way, here's those questions you've been asking. Maybe be able to put some, some things to rest, some people, some families, hundreds of people are dead from bacterial pneumonia. Was it Legionnaires? Do we know this? We don't know. Oh, they're just going to cover their own butts. And so the truth to the suffering people of Flint is not important. So yeah, I mean, I wish I could say I was surprised the extent of the cover up. I mean, I don't know how somebody can say it's not my problem. I followed all the laws, but let me go ahead and wipe this phone real quick. And let me just point out, because I'm a plaintiff in multiple lawsuits, I have not been able to wipe my phones. Even when I upgraded my phone because it had had enough of me, I've gone through 3 phones. I've had to retain all of them. I couldn't trade them in for any value because I had to retain all the information on it. I wasn't allowed to wipe my phones or wipe my email. I had to actually pay for additional Gmail storage because, I'm involved in these lawsuits, and it's the right thing to do to retain all information so you don't look guilty. And so if me, a person who's impacted by their actions, knows better than to wipe phones, the fact that they've wiped several high-ranking officials who were in charge of the water switch and in charge of the data and who were handling the resident complaints about the deaths, the destruction, our homes falling apart, our bodies falling apart, our kids suffering, the miscarriages, the pneumonia deaths. If they get to wipe their phones and then say, whoops, well, we don't have the evidence, and geez, there's nothing wrong with that. But then again, you look at who are you going to complain to? Who are you going to complain to? The same people that are wiping their phones to hide their culpability and to hide the facts. I mean, these are human lives. That's the thing that's the worst about all of this. We're people. We're paying consumers, because again, if we didn't pay our water bill, our water would have been shut off and we wouldn't be poisoned. But we are paying our water bill, so we're consumers. We're your constituents. You've been elected and hired through our tax dollars to protect us and protect public health, but let's go ahead and wipe them phones. Let's go ahead and worry about who's responsible and who might get held responsible. And then say that you didn't think you did anything wrong. Innocent people don't hide evidence. And especially while there's 100,000 people suffering. Oh yeah, completely destroy it. So there was no way. And they're like, they didn't save it in the cloud. So I'm a social worker, and my phone, no, we have to protect, we have to document every communication with our clients. We have to make sure every bit of evidence, and the work I do through SWORD for Social Security, we have to maintain all those medical records. We're not allowed to shred them. We're not allowed to toss them. The records, good or bad, no matter what it is, the documentation, it has to be logged to protect us and to protect our clients. So why couldn't we get this basic respect from these public officials who were telling us at the same time out of the other side of their face that the water was fine, nothing to worry about. Let me go ahead and, just go ahead and toss this phone in the garbage and everything on it. But there's nothing wrong, nothing wrong. Let's go ahead and throw this phone away. Don't worry about that. Getting a new phone because I want a better camera has nothing to do with the data on it. Trust us. Yeah.
Melissa, I want to point out a few things and ask you a few things. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'll put words in my mouth. To me, much bigger than Flint, this is the biggest government cover-up of the 21st century. I mean, all I do for a living is find cover-ups and corruption or whatever. I have never found anything like this. Jen, I don't know if you agree, but I don't know of anything more corrupt, a more multi-layer cover-up from the governor down. Democrats aren't innocent either, by the way. And a cover-up that had actual life or death consequences. To me, if Watergate didn't involve the president, this is a lot more corrupt than Watergate. And Watergate, in the history books and media circles, is the holy grail. Because Watergate was just Richard Nixon being a corrupt mongrel. But, this is governor, health department, environmental department, IT department. There's a financial element to this, which we'll get into. So to me, this is the biggest government cover of the 21st century. And what's striking to me about it, Melissa, and I just want to read one person's quote. On whether Snyder was involved in efforts to cover up state officials' knowledge of the Flint water crisis, Peter Hammer, who's a Wayne State professor, was blunt. He told us, quote, if the actions reported here are accurate, it is impossible for me to believe that the governor was not aware of efforts to hide and destroy damaging information. And I think that's super important because, you know, there's a Democratic attorney general. Her name's Dana Nessel. She came in January 2019 and basically cleaned house. She got rid of the special prosecutor, Todd Flood, who him and his team for 3 years had built a case. And they were, as we've reported, they were building a case for involuntary manslaughter, not a misdemeanor. And frankly, I mean, I don't know Todd Flood from a hole in the wall. I don't really care. But the attorney general threw him under a bus, said him and his team fucked up. But our reporting indicates him and his team had like almost 2 hands tied behind their back. So I wonder if the attorney general's office has all this information that I know that we've reported. So what information did they present to a one-man grand jury? Because that's how this process was done. It was a judge as a one-man grand jury. We don't know what evidence was presented to him. We don't know if any of this evidence was presented to him because it's a secretive process. And secondly, how on earth could the chief executive of a state not know all of this is going on underneath him, including, we haven't read it yet, but his top advisor, his fixer, his henchman, whatever you want to call it, going around trying to get to talk to state officials before they sit down for under oath testimony and basically get them on script. Talk to them to try and influence their testimony, which is obstruction of justice. I mean, I'm gonna just read one quote because this is the villain quote of the year. Colin, if you could find this. Enemies cannons. Here, we got access to Richard Baird, the governor's right-hand man's text messages, and he had a very, very known allergy to putting anything in writing. And this is shown. One of his texts was to the former Flint emergency manager saying, trust me, amigo, emails are fodder for our enemies' cannons. Trust me, amigo, emails are fodder for our enemies' cannons. Baird wrote to ex-Flint emergency manager Darnell Early in March 2015, quote, suggest you default to the phone call or got a minute, drop by approach. I learned this the hard way. So all of that, how in the hell? I just want justice, whatever that is. So if Snyder really didn't do anything, then okay. But our reporting indicates he did a lot, and it wasn't just neglecting his duty. He wasn't neglecting his duty. He was very much acting to cover this up. So to you, a Flint resident, isn't it kind of insulting that he's only charged with a misdemeanor when all of this erasing of phones, altering of phones, his lieutenant is interfering with the investigation? All this is going on. What is he, in bed drinking a margarita?
I just want to remind everybody that he ran on the nickname, Governor Snyder ran on the nickname of One Tough Nerd. Okay, so if you're a nerd, how do you just not know any of this stuff is going on right underneath your nose? And also he said when he so-called apologized to Flint that the buck stops with him. But he sure as can be threw that buck to everybody else, or then just said the buck didn't exist. So yeah, no. And the fact of the matter is that this one-person jury, it's an interesting interest. I didn't even know it was a law in Michigan until this happened. And if that one person read just even part of what you've shown in this article, how they could charge him with a misdemeanor and basically a parking ticket. That has a $1,000 fine. So basically that's 1 penny per person poisoned in Flint. How he got a parking ticket out of this, knowing that he's in charge. You know, he's the one tough nerd that's the head of all this, and he said before that he reads everything that crosses his desk. unless his desk is the garbage can, or if that's the stop before it hits the desk. You know, how could he walk around and be like, yeah, I'm okay with not knowing all these bad things happened. Oh my goodness. But also, I'm not going to do anything to fix it either. You know, whether, you know, if he wants to say that he didn't know about any of this, he sure hasn't done anything. I mean, his attorneys are trying to help Richard Baird, his right-hand man, get out of his actual big boy charges. So I think that that's kind of interesting. If he, you know, you'd think that if he was just so appalled, you know, clutching his pearls, oh my goodness, I can't believe this happened right under my nose and I didn't know it, you'd think he'd want to distance himself from the people that did it. But instead, nope, that just, you know, arm in arm, tighter than ever. You know, it's everybody against the Flint people that are like, hey, we just want to know what y'all put in our water. We want to know who decided it. And we want somebody to be held accountable, because the fact that if you can get away with poisoning 100,000 people for profit for a privatized pipeline scheme that failed, and if you can experiment on humans and, you know, they die, they get permanently disabled, disfigured. You know, we have young ladies that are afraid to have children down the line because they don't know if their eggs are poisoned. And then we have young men who can pass down their lead poisoning in their bones for 3 generations. So we have people not wanting to have kids, not wanting to go, you know, bring more life into our city, our great city, because of the decisions of these people that are, again, they were in the sole position to protect us. And let's not forget that Governor Rick Snyder decided in 2011 he wanted to take unilateral control over our city, meaning he could veto everything. He and his appointed unelected emergency manager made all the decisions for the city of Flint, because that's his big thing, his big law. He's like, I'm gonna fix this budget problem that I caused with my policies. I'm gonna fix this by taking control over the city, because they can't manage their own money because they're minority Black and brown community and majority poor, so they can't manage their own finances, even though I stopped the, you know, revenue sharing and the money that was going to help support post-industrial cities. I guess, you know, he caused the problem, but he decided to take unilateral control, be the dictator over Flint. So he was talking he was always in the media saying, oh, look at this improvement, look at this improvement. But yet when the water crisis finally broke, after we were yelling and screaming for over a year, when it finally broke, he's like, oh, not it. I had nothing to do with this. I had nothing to do with it. Yeah, you can't do that. You can't selectively choose. Oh, you know, I'm a dictator, but I'm going to go ahead and claim the good stuff. But the bad stuff, not it. And then my staff that I handpicked, not it. I had nothing to do with that, because I'm completely not tough nerd that reads everything. So which one is it? You can't be both. So yeah, no, he is responsible. And at the end of the day, you're the man in charge. You put these people in place. You set the culture. You allowed these policies to go on. And that's the scariest part. And that's the warning here, that we've been going on over 2,600 days in this Flint water crisis. And other governments are noting this and seeing that, hey, look, you know, say we cut some costs with water treatment. Nobody notices. The pipes are in the ground, out of sight, out of mind. Unless the water comes up discolored, people don't seem to notice. And the scariest part is that lead, you know, bacteria, other dangerous contaminants, disinfection byproducts, carcinogens, they typically don't carry a color, a taste, or an odor. So that's the really scary part. I mean, we should all know about PFAS by now as well, so surprise. This can be replicated in every other city, and it's already started, to where you've got people in charge of the water treatment and the health department and people who are in charge of public health. You have these elected officials making these decisions to make money and cut corners, to profit, you know, to cut taxes for the wealthy or whatever they want to do, on the backs of the poor. And we're paying the highest rates in the United States for water that is still causing harm. And that's pretty interesting, because then we have to buy bottled water. So guess what, private water bottle companies, you getting rich off of our suffering too. So yeah, this is profitable for people that's not Flint. And guess what? Completely, they can replicate this in other cities. This is going to be the playbook of government corruptions, cover-ups, and you know, how to harm innocent people because you think they're not smart enough to catch you. Surprise. You poison the wrong city, and then guess what? We're doing everything we can to get in the way. And try as they might to get rid of us, we're sticking around. And we're, you know, we got people like you guys, you, Jordan and Jen, who aren't afraid of the threats and the warnings and, you know, the pushback that you've gotten to be able to, you know,
I've already
Get the
had
truth
my
out there.
career torpedoed by covering Flint, so
Yeah,
at this point, there's no there's
you're used to it.
nowhere to go but forward. I wanna drill down on something because I think it's kind of a really blinking red lights question, and I'm going to say it one more time. None of this has been refuted. Not just this story, but our story in January that showed Governor Snyder, his chief of staff, and his health director were on the phone like a bunch of drunken teenagers over 2 days, and the criminal prosecutors concluded they were covering up the Legionella outbreak 16 months earlier than Snyder told Congress that he learned about it. That's perjury. I mean, literally, departments responded for this story. If you read it, the health department basically said, "No, we don't care to comment about all these wiped phones."
We
So,
don't care. That's their
so
state.
this is all iron tight. So again, it begs the question. It begs the question: how in the world is the current prosecution? Attorney General Dana Nessel says she isn't involved with the criminal prosecution. She's been involved with the civil settlements, and she, her team under her is prosecuting it. I think that's a bunch of baloney. Of course, the Attorney General is part of the decision making here. But putting that aside, he was charged with a misdemeanor in January. His trial has been delayed because the judge ruled that they would give Snyder's lawyers more time to go through documents. This does not look like a misdemeanor. This looks like potentially obstruction of justice. This looks like potentially tampering with evidence. Sure, you could say, well, there's no evidence Snyder directly did it. Well, there is evidence that he is responsible for the state health department, the state environmental department. These are top officials. These aren't the janitors who did this. Where did they get the instruction to do this? They didn't just decide one day to hand in their phones and then they get wiped. They were told to do it, presumably by higher people. So, the media, and we'll get to this in a bit, I'd be surprised, even for a story this corrupt and this big, if the Detroit Free Press covers it, if the Detroit News covers it, if the Flint Journal covers it. They never cover these things. They don't seem to really, they seem to rationalize to themselves somehow that their readers, all of Flint, all of Michigan, all of the country, shouldn't know these things. But to you, as a Flint resident who I presume was hopeful when Attorney General Dana Nessel came in, and Governor Whitmer, the Democrat governor, came in, do you want answers for their prosecution and their charges?
So we knew with Bill Schuette, the former attorney general, being a Republican, being, tight with Snyder, and knowing that he was going to be running for governor, we knew that justice was going to be slow. We knew that, Todd Flood could only get so much done because obviously the state GOP wanted to cover their own butts and they wanted to maintain control over our state. Now, the GOP still has our state house, which doesn't help. That's why we don't have new appropriations. And even if Governor Whitmer wanted to do stuff to help us, like, getting more bottled water to people, getting, more funding for infrastructure repair, water heaters, anything, it's not going to go through the state house. It's not going to be because they said there's state representatives that said if we fix Flint, we're going to have to fix every poison water community in Michigan. Yeah, so do that. I mean, I'd prefer to pay for taxes for that so people aren't getting poisoned than, I don't know, your, tax cuts for your corporations and your wealthy. So I prefer they pay their taxes and that we could all have clean drinking water. They use the same water systems as we do, except they probably have fancy filters. Now, so we were patient with Todd Flood and he got motion, he got it moving, and we knew how difficult of a case that it was. And we worked alongside him. We helped with as much evidence as we could. And, with what we had dug up on our own beforehand and before he got the cases, but we knew it was going to be, it was going to be slow because the attorney general had his hand in it. Obviously, we knew he wasn't going to be charging his best friend. Okay, quote unquote best friend. But we knew there was going to be issues with that. Let's just say that. So we were, excited when Dana Nessel said, hey, I'm going to get justice for Flint. I'm not going to allow this to continue on. We're going to settle those civil cases so maybe people can get money to fix their homes and bodies and get some medical treatment. And then we're going to allow them to, hopefully be able to move forward, to be able to find this recovery they keep talking about, whatever that means. And so we had hope. But then as her campaign went on and as the year went on, around September, we started hearing rumors that she was going to replace not just Todd Flood, but the entire team, because what we had heard was Todd Flood is a Republican. He had donated to Snyder's previous campaign, before he poisoned us. And that was interesting. I'm like, whoa, first of all, once again, y'all are making a human crisis a political problem. It does not matter who we voted for. We got poisoned. And both sides of the aisle either stayed silent and complicit or did it. So, and I've said before, and I got all kind of yelled at that, so the Republicans in our state and federal government were like, screw you. We don't care about your poor people. We don't care about your Black and brown community. We don't care about your children. Drink up this poison water. We hate you. We don't like you. You don't vote for us anyways. We don't like you. But then on the other hand, the Democrats were like, we love you and we're going to save you while they're jamming the knife in our back. So, that's what ended up happening. And I got yelled at for saying that because we're supposed to be nice and blah, blah, blah. And so I got uninvited to a bunch of Biden meetings. Like one that just happened a couple weeks ago with the EPA. Apparently I'm not welcome for saying these things, but whatever. I don't care what side of the aisle you're on. This is a huge issue. Should not be. Yeah, I got uninvited. I'm talking about the Flint water crisis, by the way. I'm like, oh, hello.
To an event that Biden was going to.
Snyder here. Yeah, no. And I wouldn't know anything about the lead and copper rule or any of that stuff, Oh, wait. Yeah, I would. But that aside, I'm not here to make friends. Except for you guys are great. But, with political officials that are not interested in fixing us properly. I have no interest in you whatsoever. I'll blast you publicly, though, with my little halo. But I'm tired of it because we still have rupturing mains. We have a sinkhole in one of our wealthier neighborhoods that's so massive, like the road is just, and they just redid the road. Let me just point that out. And, but then the mains keep rupturing underneath the streets. So we have this huge thing and we're looking at like all of our drinking water because, the mains are what's in the street that brings it to our service lines, brings the water to our service lines. And we're supposed to drink that. Lovely stuff. Even if you have a new service line, you got junk water coming into it. And then you've got, destroyed infrastructure, fixtures, appliances, water heaters, dishwashers, washing machines coming into your house. Hello. We have a clean straw. Like some of us got a clean straw from the lawsuit. The Maze was on that too. Safe Drinking Water Act case. But it's still going to be, contaminated by these corroded pipes throughout. And I'm like, just replace the whole thing. That's the common sense way. But oh my goodness, what would I know about common sense? I'm a female. My bad. I have kids. Guess what?
I feel that.
So the thing is, so we were hopeful that, a woman was going to come in and, take over the governor and take over. And we were made promises that we're going to do justice for Flint because that's what Dana Nessel had ran on. And a few months later, she fires Todd Flood and his team that had been working on our case for over 3 years. And instead of bringing her team in to kind of meld minds and, work with the people who had experience and who we trusted, because that's another thing too. They keep wanting to say, trust us, trust us, trust us, but they keep forgetting the whole thing about trust being earned. When are you going to trust the water? Well, when the new pipes get it put in. When are you going to trust your elected officials? Well, when they do something for us and not themselves. When they actually listen to our version or our description. I asked, and I got yelled at. I asked at the town hall after they dropped the charges and let us sit there suffering for 3 weeks in silence. The Attorney General's office in 2019, summer 2019, had a town hall that many people couldn't go to or wouldn't because it was surrounded by the largest gathering of state police cars you've ever seen in your life. I was nervous walking in there and I'm like, oh goodness. And then I got the frowny face when I gave my name and I'm like, well, that's, normal, fine. But when I asked my question, I asked had they actually met with Flint residents, actual Flint residents, not people who live outside of Flint that speak for us, because we have plenty of those, asked us, what's our definition of justice? Because y'all keep saying you're going to give us justice. And so far you've done the opposite. Yeah, I got screamed at. Whatever. But, justice to us means many things. And people have it. But at the end of the day, with Flint Rising, which is a melding of Flint grassroots groups and outside allies that were helping us, we went door to door and canvassed and were able to ask residents of Flint want to see in order to find justice. And of course, everybody would love to see the people who did this to us behind bars, because then that would say that our lives actually matter and it's a crime to destroy them. It'd be nice, it's a crime to poison me and break my house and, kill my friends and neighbors. That's a crime, because that means we mean something, even if our bank accounts aren't high. So the top 3 things were to replace every piece of tainted and corroded infrastructure from the water treatment plant up into the taps in all Flint homes using Flint hams. We should not have unemployed plumbers, unemployed apprentices, things like that in a water crisis. But guess what? And then also we wanted full wraparound holistic care, education support, mental health care, physical health care for every resident for life. We've asked for Medicare for all for life, because they got it in Libby, Montana when they were poisoned. So we're like, we need something like that. And we need it because there was a Medicaid expansion done for children under the age of 21. But of course, if you leave the state, and sometimes the area, it gets cut off. And again, it doesn't help the adults, the grandparents taking care of said children. So if you've got sick adults, can't really do much with taking care of sick kids. So again, being piecemeal, because that's all they could actually drag, from us. And also we want a refund of all poison water bills paid since April 25th, 2014, because basic consumer, if you sell me a tainted product, I come back and I want a refund, and I want a better one. I want one that doesn't harm me. But for some reason, apparently, like, the laws of consumerism don't count with that. Like, I would like to return this poison water, please. I would like a refund on the water that, caused my hair to fall out, that caused neurological damage to my, my son, myself, that caused growth problems with 2 of my sons, memory loss with my oldest son. I don't really like these new health problems, so I would like a refund. And, that's not happening either. So, that's what we asked for. That's what, and also at the end of the day, for most people, justice is turning on that tap, not having to do anything with a filter, not having to worry about boiling it, since we have all these rupturing pipes. Everybody's like, well, we got to filter our water and boil it. It's got to stay that way if you want to use it for anything, since we have all of these, mains rupturing. That means we're losing pressure. There's going to be some issues with chlorine going out and not being able to get rid of the bacteria. Wonderful.
I want to highlight that for people that with these mains breaking, that can introduce bacteria, which then, correct me if I'm wrong, Melissa, like, then the recommendation can be, well, boil your water. But when you boil your water, it concentrates the lead, which is still in the part of this piping and in people's homes.
Which means we have to filter it first with these tap filters that are not meant for this. They're rated up to 150 parts per billion. Some people, like myself included, our homes tested way higher than that, in the hundreds and thousands of parts per billion. But then also the other metals, like, it doesn't touch copper. And my neurologist said that copper could be one of the reasons why I've got the hand tremors, and it could be an issue with the seizures. And copper is also stored in women's reproductive organs, because we're super lucky. And yes, so the metals, but then also the disinfection byproducts that's released into steam. So you have to boil it and then you have to steam it. But here's the thing, Legionella, that gets released through water droplets and steam in a shower and boiling. So you got to keep your face away from that. So yeah, it's a thing to stay safe in your own home. And so that's what most of us want. We just want to be able to turn on the tap, and the water we pay the highest rates in the United States for, have it not to do anything funky to it. We don't have to filter it or boil it and then stand back being like, oh, no, got to stay back from my water, because God knows what can happen, because we don't know, because they still won't tell us what's all in our water, because, lying to us is apparently the motto here. And yeah, I just want to be able to use it like normal, like we did before they switched our water, and not be harmed and not worry about harm, not be, concerned like, oh, I went to go water my plants and the water came out bright yellow. Like, I don't know if anybody's taken a multivitamin with a lot of, whatever, how your urine looks bright yellow after taking the vitamin. Yeah, that came out of my tap. And I'm like, well, that's wicked awesome. That's great. I'm not going to give this to my plants. So I guess we're not going to use the hose water. Cool. So let's just buy more bottled water. No. So yeah, so we're stuck between a rock and a hard place, because we also, like I said, don't want to make these water bottle companies rich, because, Nestle, Well, they threatened to arrest me and my children. Just going to ask some questions at their bottling plant. I was being polite, and this was filmed because Michael Moore was there filming. They threatened to arrest him too. So, I just wanted to ask questions. They said we were a bunch of terrorists. I'm like, okay, well, we just wanted to ask questions. But so, we don't want to make them, rich, but we also, what are we supposed to do? Trust this water that's going through tainted infrastructure that we can see exploding out into the streets? Oh yeah, that's great. Yeah, and so they're just like, well, they just don't trust their elected officials. That's a whole other situation. That has nothing to do with whether we're going to trust our water. We just know it's coming through broken pipes because we can see it, and then we can smell it and see it coming out of our taps. It's over 7 years later, and so no, we're not stupid. We're not just scared. We are tired. We're fed up. We would like to be treated like humans. I mean, that would be kind of nice. But we like to be treated like consumers who pay these super high rates. We're like the white glove, people that get the really expensive cars. They paid a lot for that car. They're going to get the white glove service. How come we can't get that with our water? And again, that boils down to people, one, acknowledging what they did, fixing what they did, stop repeating the same thing about, oh no, we're following all regulations. No, we're not, but we're not going to tell you. We're going to cover it up and lie. I mean, this administration in our city right now doesn't even bother to tell people, hey, boil your water. There's, we got lowered pressure and, mains rupturing, in case you didn't notice when trying to drive down the street or walk. They obviously don't care about the truth or our health or anything but spending our tax dollars to defend themselves against what they did to us.
And I just want to point out, because there's an important element about the mains breaking. So for those that don't know plumbing, like the mains are the main pipes underneath the street. And they go to the service lines, which are the shorter pipes that go from your curb into your house. And then obviously you have your pipes inside your home. The only pipes that have been replaced, and not all of them, 7 years later, are the service line pipes from the curb into the house. The main pipes, which many of them were just, century old, cast iron.
Some are wood.
They were not touched because the state and city said, oh no, these pipes were not damaged by the toxic water going through them for 18 months. It was just the smaller service line pipes that were damaged. So, it's a disgrace that all of the service lines haven't been replaced 7 years later. They certainly would in a yuppie white community.
Oh, absolutely.
Probably in 6 months. It's also important they have not replaced residents' interior plumbing. So even if the brand new service lines from the curb to the valve entering the house, even if that's changed, if you got corroded, damaged pipes inside your home, you're still going to have lead and other heavy metals coming off. But the main pipes were not changed, and they were damaged too. That's why you have all these main breaks. So the media that regurgitated the bullshit coming from the Snyder administration that, oh, the water is improving. Oh, here's the data that we doctored to show that the lead levels are meeting EPA regulations. By the way, Jenn and I knocked on nearly fucking 500 doors, excuse my French, to reveal in 2018 that Snyder's environmental department doctored the data by flushing residents' water lines right before putting the sample bottle in to test for lead and copper. So all of this, oh no, you see people on Twitter, it's almost like they're paid to do this. Oh no, Flint's water has been fine for many years.
I enjoy those.
The state says so, or the numbers say so. Well, how could it be fine if the main pipes underneath the street are breaking at crazy rates? How could it be fine if the service lines have not all been replaced? And how could it be fine if people's interior plumbing in their home, which is badly damaged, because I've seen some of it, is damaged?
They like to paint this picture that the water that was basically acid, the very acidic water that they refused to treat and pump through, it somehow jumped over the mains that come from the water treatment plant, skipped that, just cruised on like over it, just tore up our service lines, but only some. And then, didn't hurt the interior plumbing. Like, they're just like, no, what are you talking about? Because they, I don't know, they listened to elected officials and paid people instead of plumbers. We had the plumbers, our local plumbers union saying, yo, hey, look at this. I mean, it was Harold Harrington from the UA, the UAW here, the United Plumbers Union. Good God, I can't talk today. I blame the lead. But no, from the plumbers union, he showed his galvanized steel service line. He sent it off to Purdue and found out that it tested at 1.5 million parts per billion of lead. Because what happens is that when corrosion hits lead service lines, which is what they're talking about, it's lead, it turns into Swiss cheese. The chunks go flying in, and then the water goes out, and it's a big old mess. It's bad. However, galvanized steel, what that does is it gets all rocky and chunky on the inside, right? So it traps and then can release far more lead than lead lines. So because they hollow out, they smooth out, lead lines smooth out, nothing gets trapped in there. I mean, then it eats through them and makes holes and makes a whole big mess. So they went on the news, they went all over the place, and they're like, okay, fine, and then what's funny, so I'm one of the named plaintiffs in the Safe Drinking Water Act case to get the lead and galvanized steel service lines replaced. My own house, we had lead, galvanized at the city side, and then because there's the city's their gooseneck where it's connected to the mains, but then it enters my service line. My service line is a long, wonky service line that's copper. However, it's every turn, every curve it makes in this weird trip all the way around to the back of my house is held together with leaded brass compression fittings. But guess what? So that sucker's still in the ground. And yes, I still have lead coming through because all the acidic, it's just pulling off. It's leaching all these metals. And they thought, well, we'll just throw some chemicals in here, chemicals that can feed bacteria. We can, we're just gonna throw these chemicals in here. And I'm like, chemicals don't coat, you can't coat holes. What are you talking about? And, and none of it was sticking because of all the main breaks and ruptures. In a lab, to get these orthophosphates to stick in this situation, you would have to have a very steady, consistent pH level for it to, not be too, high or too low. So these chemicals can stick and coat the pipes. Well, guess what? You can't coat holes. And if you got holes, you're not going to have good luck keeping any kind of pH level steady or anything else. And then they're dumping all the extra chlorine to go after the bacteria. They're dumping all the extra God knows what in here. Yeah, it's just tearing everything up. I'm like, okay, so they're still pulling out service lines with no white coating on the inside because nothing's stuck. I'm like, well, cool, but we just got the, 4 times the regular rate of orthophosphates dumped in on us. And then our former mayor, Karen Weaver, asked, what are the health implications and the effects of humans of these this such a high level of orthophosphates? She got yelled at in her own meeting. Yeah, I mean, so they're just like, we just won't tell them because, we don't want them to know because, oh, that's right. We're stupid, we're uneducated, and we don't know how to use the Googles or talk to each other and the internets and learn things. But also, we're just dumb animals. We're just going to run around in the streets going, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. That's literally how they continue to portray us. We're just these scared, dumb creatures that can't handle science. And I've said it on how many times. Yeah. No, listen, you have no right to lie to me because it's my job. It's my job. I birthed these kids. And I've been married to this dude almost 25 years. It's my job to keep him alive. I'm going first. Don't leave me here with these kids. But no, like the thing is I said that, it's my job and my right as a mother and as a resident and a paying customer to know what's in my water. So I know how to properly protect my family. You took that right away from me when you lied to me and told me it was safe. So I gave my kids tap water, clear as can be, full of metals, instead of like soda or sugary juices, because I thought I was doing the right thing for my kids' brains. So, I guess that's okay. And I'm not afraid of knowing what's coming through my pipes and what's coming out my tap. If I need to know what it is, I know how to fix the problem. What's scary is not knowing. And they keep flipping that around. Oh no, she's just a scared housewife. Yo, I got 2 jobs also, and don't talk to me like that. If I get called young lady one more time, I testified in Congress and ran a congressman out for calling me young lady. And, cool, I'm young. Not really. I mean, this has aged me like 100 years. But I also know science and I know big words and I know that you're lying to me because that's just simple. I can see your face and your ears are turning red. Stop it. But that's the thing. We can't get them to give us any kind of respect. And at least we had a little bit of that with Todd Flood's team, because his team would reach out. They would ask us questions. They would say, what did you go through with this? And they would follow the proper channels. He contacted my attorneys first. That's what you're supposed to do. contact my attorneys, and then set it up. And then they're on the phone to make sure that everything was done safely and right. And then I felt comfortable. And yeah, so here's what I went through. Here's the data that we collected on our own because we couldn't get help from anybody else. And here's all the things that we did and what we found out. And so at least we felt a part of getting justice. And then this new Attorney General's team drops all the charges, gives us some rando reason saying that things weren't done right. We're like, wait, we were there. We were at these hearings. We know better. You're lying to us. And then we get yelled at and get told, well, we can't really tell you anything because, it's an active investigation. And we're, all we can say is we're just going to look at the evidence, see where it takes us. But don't ask any questions because you're going to get yelled at. And then you're going to be called unruly. And oh my goodness, like that's terrible. But also, like, we don't have the right to know. Like, we aren't paying, my property taxes and my water bills and all this nightmarish stuff, the medical bills, that flipping barrage of specialists and doctors who are not trained for this, by the way. This is a first world country. We're not supposed to have these problems. So my doctor's like, hey, I'm not a water expert. I can tell you your water's poisoning you, but I have to send you off to people who do, like environmental physicians and stuff like that. This is not supposed to happen here. But guess what? It's happening everywhere. And then to answer people's questions, why don't you move? Because we get that question all the time, which is rude. First of all, I didn't do this to my house. It's my house. It's my city, my bands, my music, my life, my kids' lives. This is our city. I didn't do this. I didn't break this, so I shouldn't have to buy this. If we leave, they get away with it. So that's going to then be replicated in your city. So you're welcome. We're staying here and fighting. You're welcome. Also for us. But, to make sure it doesn't happen to somebody else. And also, since 2015, I've been able to travel all over North America to help other communities organize around their tainted water. I don't know where I would move to be honest with you. So far, there's 37 states or more now that have a version of the emergency manager law that allowed Governor Snyder to take dictatorship over our city and make all the decisions and then claim none of the responsibility when it went bad. But also, this is happening all over the place. So most places have the capability of becoming Flint. They're already on this path. Corners are already being cut, lies are already being told. And I mean, we just don't have, like, the EPA has been so scaled back, they don't really have any enforcement anymore. And, obviously industry and corporations have taken over our government. So, accountability just, so I don't want to leave the devil I know and go get poisoned somewhere else. Because a lot of Flint residents have done that and been poisoned in another city. So we're gonna hang here and fight. So that way they don't get away with it to our last dying breath, but also to try to stop this pattern from being copied in all the other cities and to try to change the laws to permanently prevent this. And, that's the best answer. And also, like, who's going to buy my poison water house? I want to highlight
I want to highlight something that you mentioned. Actually, a couple things. One is that there seems to be a concerted effort to paint you and others who are incredibly knowledgeable and who live this daily as idiots or dumb.
Yeah.
And the other is to keep you out of people's ears out of important meetings at any cost. If these were people who really wanted to help, would those things be happening?
No, I mean, if they wanted to fix Flint's problems, they would, invite the people who are working on Flint's problems. And they'll invite a couple, like usually the people that are nicer than me and who don't, put them up against the wall and everything like that, figuratively, not literally. And that aren't as loud and out there, but many of us who have been on the front line since day one, we don't get invited to these meetings. We get, actually actively kept out. And, if they wanted to fix this, they would listen to the people who have been working on the fixes on the ground and the people who have been hands-on since, the beginning of all this. And not just, getting the attention to it, but actually pushing for and working on solutions, like through the lawsuits, through the different petitions, through all of the different community actions and everything. So you would think, but no, I mean, so the pattern continues of, basically all these people making decisions, when it comes to Flint about us, without us. And then, of course, keeping these meetings secret because they don't want people. We find out like a day later that, it happened because somebody had said, oh, I was here at this meeting. And, you try not to get angry and insulted. You want to know the contents of the meeting, but nobody records it and nobody tells you like, what's going on at these things. And you find out afterwards, all these closed door meetings. I mean, we've traveled to Chicago at the EPA Region 5 headquarters and stood outside there saying, open the doors. We deserve, put it on live stream. We deserve. And the Flint Water Interagency Coordinating Committee meetings that were happening with Governor Snyder, we weren't allowed in the building. We did die-in. So that like the elected official or the people that were, chosen to go in, I had to step over our dead bodies. That was clever. But then, we're not allowed in there. They didn't let the media in there at first. And, we find out in, written articles like a day or two later, oh, this happened, really? So so EPA Region 5, the head was here in Flint and didn't, talk to all the Flint residents that have been on the ground and also the residents themselves who are stuck with this water to give them any answers or to tell them what they're going to do. And that's another thing too. Nobody ever comes with a plan of action. They're like, oh, you tell us what you want. We've been telling you for years. It hasn't changed. Replace the pipes. Hold these people accountable, put them in jail, and replace our, tainted appliances and fixtures, and give us help. Just let us be human. Like if you hit me with your car, you would be, probably not. It'd be me, somebody to cheer for it. But okay, if you hit somebody else with your car, you would have to fix it. You'd have to fix the person. If you hit their car, you would have to repair their car and get it back to the way it was. So we don't want any more half-assed attempts and band-aids and piecemeal this. No, fix it right because we're people. We're human beings. We deserve this and better because we've been putting up with your crap this long. And we've been pretty peaceful, just so you know. We've been pretty peaceful for the, the ignorant thugs that they paint us out to be. We've been very peaceful and we have concentrated on changing. We did work and got the strongest lead and copper rule in all 50 states approved in the state of Michigan. It's still not good enough, but it's something. But we're doing that to protect others because, we're so uneducated and ignorant and scared little creatures that, but we're changing the laws so that way there can be a permanent change to protect other people, to not have to go through what we're going through, because that's the last thing we want is to go through 7 years of fighting and suffering and fighting and sacrifice. And, like people like me, I had a cool life before this. I was a music promoter, I managed bands, put on shows, worked at 5 different radio stations doing marketing, like, what my master's degree is for. It's fine. But now it's all water. It's water, 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 and community, and trying to help patch our community together with the best resources and limited resources that we have. And it's not a lot. I mean, we got to transfer people out of this county to get them help. And where did the money go?
Well, it seems like that's always been what your kind of mission has been, from knowing you and like reporting on your story for a while. Maybe explain to the audience, you've been offered things, which we've reported on this before, in order to shut you up and get you to go away. But you said, and tell them what you said about everyone else.
So at the end of 2015, there was an investigation. That's when they started investigating what was going on. And I got called into a meeting and, so these people want to know what was going on. So I went in there.
Let me cut you off for a second because I think it's important to point this out before that. Colin, if you could get to this part. So the person you're about to reveal paid you off, or tried to pay you off because you didn't take it, is the same person that our reporting in this story reveals was approaching state officials right before their testimonies with criminal investigators and trying to influence their testimony. So that would be Richard Baird, Governor Snyder's consigliere. And I'm going to read from this part. Around the same time in October 2016, criminal prosecutors were tipped off that top officials in Snyder's administration, including Baird, had approached other state officials before their interviews with criminal prosecutors, according to documents we obtained. Quote, "It's come to my attention as recent as yesterday that some of the witnesses that we have been bringing in have been contacted by government or former government employees to talk about testimony that they may or may not give." Then Special Prosecutor Todd Flood told Jay Fiedler in a confidential interview. Fiedler was with the health department. While interviewing Sarah Werfel, Snyder's press secretary, who's phone was erased. Flood also noted these attempts. Quote, there have been times where people have been contacted after testimony that have sat in investigative subpoenas before to talk about what they testified to. There have been, as disclosures have shown, people have been talked to in cases where witnesses have been talked about what they should say in an investigative subpoena. If someone were to do that, I would consider it tampering with evidence and an obstruction, and I would charge anybody that would do that to you. So Baird was charged with everything but the kitchen sink, including obstruction of justice for this interference that we're talking about. But again, governor's right-hand man, top advisor. This is as close to the governor as, anybody. As we reported, he offered to pay people off. Share your story.
So I was in one of many, many meetings with the Natural Resources Defense Council, the NRDC, and ACLU of Michigan, who are our attorneys in the Safe Drinking Water Act case, the pipe replacement case, right? And so we were meeting in Detroit. My attorneys flew in, and we all drove down. And for people who ask if I make money, no, I didn't even get my parking reimbursed. It's $20. But anyway, so we get pulled into this meeting, and we're talking about one of the testing people, the people that were chosen to do the independent monitoring, that there were some issues that had been brought to our attention, and there were community concerns. So we were delivering the concerns the community had and that we had to the defendants. So you're looking at Richard Coup, who's the attorney for Governor Snyder in the state. You're looking at the attorneys for the MDEQ and MDHHS. So it's this long wooden table. At the end of it's a fridge full of Nestle, full of chilled water. I was like, no thanks. And it was May and it was hot. I had to, deal with all that. Anyway, so it's myself and Pastor Overton, because it's the Concerned Pastors for Social Action, Melissa Mays, ACLU of Michigan, and NRDC versus Snyder and all of them. So in this case, so we had on our side, on this side where I'm at right now, we're looking across at the table full of attorneys. Now, Rick Snyder, not coming, but somebody called in who was coming from the west side of the state and said, I'm running late. It was Richard Baird. And he said, Rick and I discussed, everything. So I'm going to be I'm going to be speaking for him today. So he was on the phone until he finally got in the meeting, sat down across from me in the meeting, and was, obviously nobody smiles when they see me. And so we're sitting there and we're going back and forth and, talking about what's needed and the concerns of the community. When he decides to say that the reason he cut off the water pods, which was the points of distribution sites for people to be able to come pick up water, okay, bottled water. The reason he cut it off is because the people of Flint weren't grateful enough. We weren't grateful enough for all the state who poisoned us had done, which, mind you, the reason they were forced to do anything is because of the lawsuit. So, okay, but just like smiling on them, like, okay, fine. So he's talking about how we're just not grateful and we're just too angry and we're just not nice enough to the state, our great overlords who are serving up this poison water. But hey, we gave you that bottled water, them 4 cases. Remember that time? Yeah. And remember that time we gave you that 35% discount on your water, or between 35 to 65%, because Rick Snyder said you could still flush your toilet. And most people didn't get the discount because if they were late on their water bills, they didn't get it. So, okay, so we weren't grateful enough. We didn't kiss their boots. And so I said, the problem is that the water's still bad. This is not working. This is not, this is not working. People are upset for good reason because we should get. So then he decides to ask me what it would take for me to trust the water. Not the first time I've been asked this by people representing certain folks. So then he asked me what it would take. And he said, well, what would make you be quiet? What would make you just be happy and be quiet and just settle down? Like what would, and I'm like, have you met me? That doesn't happen. Fine. But he said, now, what if I personally pay to replace your service line and your water heater and your interior plumbing and fixtures and all your appliances, all the things you're having problems with? What if I replaced all that? Then would you be happy? So I sat there and I grinned because I'm like, oh, you're getting mad. His ears are red. Next red. And I said, well, if you did that for every single resident in Flint, yes. Yeah. Well, guess what didn't happen?
That's going to be the highlight of the movie. One of the big scenes.
Well,
so,
and I did it before
insane.
because there was somebody there was another group of people that had asked me that same thing. What would it take for you to trust the water? And because you're such a trusted voice in the community, what would it take for you to convince other people to trust the water? Now, this is December of 2015. And so, I made it to look like I was writing in a notebook. I'm like, haha, because in my mind, everybody else that was going to be offered this was going to say the same thing as me, because I thought we were on the same page. But so what I thought of, and my husband does not let me forget this. He's like, you could have asked for $1 million, and I didn't. What I said was, what would make me trust the water, and what would have me encourage, everybody else in Flint to trust the water, is if you all replaced every single piece of plumbing and pipe from the water treatment plant through the streets, to the service lines, up into every single faucet, fixture, and appliance in every single apartment, home, shack, and shanty in the city of Flint that's receiving Flint water. And then after all of that is replaced at no cost to Flint residents, then you will test every single home, shack, apartment, shanty for every single dangerous contaminant. And when those tests all come back at 0, I'll think about it. And I walked out of there like I was like, ha 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 ha. I was big, so I started calling other people, and nobody was responding in my calls. And then I find out later that other people got some things and I didn't. And I was like, well, but still. So my answer hasn't changed. So I don't know what Rich Baird thought he was gonna, get from offering that to me and, trying to get me to shut up or whatever. I mean, again, I got sued for $3 million and then shut up. So, I won, by the way.
Well, perhaps in his world, it's, he's used to people being out for themselves. And so for you, who you're not, obviously you want health for you and your family and safety for you and your family, but you want that for everybody, which is, that old saying, I don't know how to make you care about other people. Like that is, yeah.
I mean, and that's the thing. I at the end of the day, too, I mean, I couldn't live in good conscience with myself sitting here with my nice clean water, which it's not going to be, because they're not going to replace the main. So once again, BS coming through to all of us, because we're all connected to the same water system. Somebody on Twitter didn't think we were. They thought we had different water systems. I'm like, no, that's not how that plumbing and infrastructure works. So, but hey, okay, fine. What do I know? My degree's in business. Fine. So, I wouldn't be able to sit here and watch my neighbors suffer, and watch them continue to have their hair fall out and rashes and brown and, smelly water coming through. No, I couldn't live with myself. I got like that conscience thing. And yeah, apparently it, cost me some bribes, whatever you want to call that, hush money, whatever. And my husband's like, you could have asked for $1 million. I'm like, oh, yeah. But I couldn't live with myself. And then, I'm like, what also sucks is this water. Yeah. And now, like, because the water was leaking and destroyed my kitchen all the way down to the studs, my 110-year-old kitchen. Now Home Depot and all, because we don't have Lowe's anymore, but Home Depot owns my soul, because I've got credit cards maxed to the hilt to try to replace, my kitchen and, the mess that's been caused because the water ate through the plumbing behind my dishwasher and we didn't see it happening. And then it warped my wood floors, and it has been, an adventure, and I'll say that lightly. But I'm not the only one. One of my friends, one of my co-plaintiffs in the civil case, Rhonda Kelso, the water ate through her black sewer line, her toilet line coming out in the wall. It exploded in the wall, and she had to take out a loan to pay for that because everything was shut. So again, acid water coming in, and even though Snyder said you could still flush your toilet, yeah, acid water eating the pipes on the way out. Metal and acid don't usually get along. Just saying. Again, my high school chemistry teacher likes to remind me that apparently I did learn something in school when I was trying to sleep.
I want to make a point that I think is important, and we've stressed this many times. So the governor was only charged with a misdemeanor, willful neglect of duty. So what that means is he was out to lunch. He was not on it. He, just was neglecting his duties to the people of Flint, to their safety, whatever. But the governor's top advisor, who you just described, attempted to pay you off. Shut up. I'll give you what does it take for you to just shut the fuck up? He didn't say that in words, but that's basically what he's saying. It's not just you. As we reported, he tried to pay off other residents. Legally, this is the governor's top official. like, sure, there's the lieutenant governor. So, like, on paper, the lieutenant governor is closest to the governor. But everybody in Michigan government knew when you were talking to Rich Baird, you were talking to the governor. And that's not my opinion. That's what he told Flint residents. What did he tell you introducing himself at meetings and things like that?
No, he said, I speak for Rick and I. And he even said at that meeting in front of all of the attorneys, Rick and I are out at the end of the year. He didn't just say like Rick Snyder's out. He said, Rick and I are out at the end of the year, so we don't care.
So, you know, there is the prosecutorial line of thought, well, we're just going to charge what we know we could get a conviction for. So maybe that was their thinking. We'll just charge for a misdemeanor because we'll get a conviction. But there's mountains of evidence that Snyder, if he wasn't directly involved, that he was indirectly involved, using the tried and true mob boss playbook, which is have everybody else around you do the dirty work. So it's just, as a reporter, as I, as Jen and I have uncovered this and written these stories, it's mind-boggling to me as a reporter how this man was essentially charged with a parking ticket. Nobody is disputing the information we've reported. You'd have to be clinically moronic to think all these things are going on and he didn't know about anything, which, if that were the case, he probably shouldn't have been the governor of a state, probably shouldn't be a manager of a lemonade stand, if that's the case. So I want to drill in for people. Today, he's going to be on trial only for a misdemeanor. With all of this out there, today, I mean, our tweet, I've been paying attention, but also sending our story out to people. Today, this story's been out since noon. Nothing from the corporate media. I would bet my bottom dollar the Detroit Free Press will cover this up, not cover it, but help cover it up. I bet my bottom last dollar the Detroit News will help cover it up. Because when you don't cover it, that's helping to cover up the information. The Flint Journal is a joke. I don't even think they're based in Flint anymore, physically. I think they're off in another city. The New York Times, the Washington Post, the AP, all of this. He's a nice guy, but I have sat on the phone with an AP reporter who has covered the Flint water crisis, and I've said, I truly don't understand it, man. Like, I don't understand it. You're writing, the AP is writing up stories basically about, Snyder's charged with a misdemeanor, literally on the same day that we're breaking a story in The Intercept that they found his phone calls, they found briefings that were sent to him that mentioned Legionella. And you don't think that's important to cover? Maybe a 3-paragraph write-up? I mean, can you kind of talk about Melissa? Because there's so many details, and Jen and I will be getting into more details of the story tomorrow, too, because we can't get into all of it today. But one has to ask, how did all of this cover-up, how is all this information able to just hang out there, ready to be had, when there's multiple major newspapers in Michigan? They could have got the sources we got. I'm from New York. She's from Maryland. We've been there over 20 times, losing money, by the way, doing it, because this isn't a profit-seeking journalistic adventure here. We'd like to make money and grow a business, but we do it for the stories. The media is as much part of this cover-up than Snyder and his Republican administration, and frankly, Obama drank the water and said it's fine. Flint's current mayor is a Democrat. He's corrupt as sin. I just want to ask you, how is it possible the mainstream media, even the local media there, would ignore phones being wiped, messages being erased, the governor refusing to hand over documents, and of course the reporting we've done before?
Well, I saw in the comments over there people commenting on how fast I talk. It's because
you should see it in person.
Yeah, when I'm not tired, because I'm tired. I worked all day today. Now, local media and mainstream media give me 2 to 3 minutes to try to say what the hell is going on in Flint and our side of it. So I had to learn to be succinct, fast, and straightforward to where they couldn't chop up what I said. I learned that the hard way. So that's why I talk fast. I'm sorry. Also, I have ADD thanks to the water. So, you know, if it goes off, it goes off. Oh yeah, I'm angry. I'm angry. Shocking. So there's that. I apologize.
There's nothing wrong with how fast you talk. It was everyone has a, you know.
I got a thing. I talk fast. I'm just used to canning my answers in short little chunks to where it would actually make it in the news to try to get out the story that, hey, we're still being killed. Now, why don't they care? Money. Snyder's tied in with obviously very wealthy people, and they all seem to cover for one another. And who owns these publications? With that, but also, I got told to my face, and our Congressman Kildee actually got told to his face, people don't want to hear about Flint anymore. They have Flint fatigue. Oh my God. Flint fatigue. People don't want to hear about it. First of all, if you're tired of hearing about it, then help us fix it. And if you're tired of hearing about it, imagine what it's like to live in it. That was one of the times I wanted to slap the bejesus out of somebody because that was rude. And not rude in a word that I can, soul enraging. So people don't care because they're tired of hearing about it. Oh, okay. Well, then, you know, I promise you we'll shut up once it's fixed properly. How about that? How about if I give you a promise, you won't see me again if things are fixed right and laws are put in place where this doesn't happen to somebody else. How about that? That's my promise. Fix this right like we were, you know, wealthy white folks and your donors. And, you know, and we'll see what that's a promise I could work with it on. But yeah, they're not gonna give and fix us without a fight, obviously. So that's what's happening. They don't care. And people have this I don't know if it's a psychological way to protect themselves, or if it's just ignorance, or if it's ego. They think that it can't happen to them. They think because they're wealthy and they're in a white town, they're in suburbia, they're in rural America, that it can't happen to them because they're not like us. Well, you use water, don't you? You know, and that's what I've done in my presentations. I've said, you know, raise your hand if you used ice cubes this morning, made coffee, brushed your teeth with your tap water, gave water to your pets, your kids, turned on that tap and didn't think twice. So, I mean, water's the last bastion, it's the last gold. So, I mean, it's being sold and traded on the stock exchange, on the, you know, as a commodity. Hello. And so, yeah, so people don't think it can happen to them, and they don't care because it's not happening to them, or so they think. There was a gentleman who used to work for the EPA in California. And of course, we always say if this would have happened in a wealthy white community, you know, this wouldn't have happened because, you know, oh my goodness, they wouldn't poison rich white folk. What he said was, it's true. This wouldn't be happening if it happened in a rich white community because they wouldn't know how to fight back. They assume that they pay in their money and that they're fine. And we had that issue in Flint. We have some very wealthy folks that live in Flint. And I went to the Miller Road mansions, and as I was escorted out of the neighborhood multiple times because I'm adorable, I was just trying to get them to let me test their water. That's it. I'm just got my little baggie with the test bottles, but asking them, please. But they said, oh, we know Mayor Dane Walling. I just played golf with him. He says the water's fine. So the water's fine. And plus, I pay my water bill. I pay my taxes. I pay a lot of money, and I donate to these local elections and the state elections. So this can't happen to me. Wrong. We found something called the Octopus, the Plumbers Union. Harold Harrington showed me, and it's a lead service line. And since these folks had multiple bathrooms and they had these different things, jacuzzis, pools, all that stuff, they don't have just one lead service line. It branched off into 4. It looked like Ursula. So being rich didn't help you there. So it's the whole thing of like, guess what? You know, it can happen to you. It might already be happening to you, but because, you know, nobody's questioning authority there, you know, and also a lot of people don't know, and I didn't know, that you have rights, the right to access your data about what's being put in your water and how your water is being treated. That's your data. Go get that data. I went in there and pretended I was a student. I don't know who believed that, but they gave me that data. And then I learned what that data meant. And we're like, oh, Lord, that's how we discovered they were not using corrosion control, anything to make the water less acidic. They were refusing to do that because it would have cost $100 a day. And I guess we weren't worth that. So Going back to Governor Snyder's $1,000 parking ticket. Yeah, the people who are dead, the people who are disabled, the people who are suffering, the people who are traumatized for all of this were worth more than $1,000 and a simple misdemeanor that he just checked out in office. Yet in all of his interviews talks about how he's hands-on, buck stops here. I'm going to take control over the city and the school system and every place he's taken over using his emergency manager law. You did this. Even if you used your fixer, if you use Rich Baird and other people at the Department of Environmental Quality and the Department of Health and Human Services, if you use them to do your dirty work and cover it up, it's still buck stops with you. You're still in charge. So yeah. Also, you're fighting like hell to get out of $1,000 misdemeanor. Your suit is worth more than $1,000 that you wore to court. Seriously. So yeah, people are dead. People are permanently damaged. Lives are destroyed. We are fighters. Again, I like to say we're not victims. We were victimized, but we're not victims. We're fighters because we have not stopped fighting. And yes, we would love to give up. We would love for this to be over. We would love to have clean water, but it doesn't look like they're just going to give us justice anytime soon. They're not going to give us clean water, and they're not going to put the people behind bars who did this to us. And again, it's not like our infrastructure, because the entire country's infrastructure is old, outdated, probably oversized, whatever. It wasn't just sitting there getting bad by itself. Let me make this clear. How Flint is different than the other cities is that we didn't have time for our pipes to just sit there and age and slowly flake off. They made the choice to switch our water source to a more acidic source, a river that most northern cities don't use for drinking water because it changes and fluctuates so much with the weather. Runoff from the farms, runoff from road salts. The choice was made to take us from our safe water source and the state decided to put us on the Flint River and then made the decision not to put in the treatment chemicals to protect the water from the pipes and the pipes from the water. So this was done to us. This is a crime, not a misdemeanor. People are dead. So that is what separates Flint from all these other toxic communities until they start making these same decisions they made in Flint, because if they can get away with it here in Flint, they're going to do that to other cities. So just keep that in mind when you talk about how Flint compares to other cities. Yeah, we have people in our community that tested at 22,500 parts per billion of lead. 5,000 is hazardous waste. We met a gentleman that had 12,000 parts per billion, and nobody told him. We found it online when they were listing all the state results and knocked on his door to tell him. He was never told. And so, yeah, it's not saying that, our junk is bigger than yours, but remember when you say there's other communities that are more toxic than Flint, first of all, we have more than lead in our water. People are dead from bacteria. People are dead from cancer, from the carcinogens, from the treatment chemicals. People are dead because this was done to us, and it's continued to be done to us. Or can be told our water is safe. Go ahead and drink up, just like other cities. Your water is just like other cities. Wrong. But other cities' water is going to end up like ours if we don't get fixed. So please don't aid the state and the people responsible in trying to downplay what's been done to us. That is the difference. Yes, the infrastructure across this country is garbage. We have not, invested in it whatsoever. Oh, let's worry about Mars. No, we need the pipes replaced in this entire country. And we need the Safe Drinking Water Act and the lead and copper rule on the federal level and state levels updated, since it's been decades. Also, just remember, this was a choice. The governor's office and his administration made this choice to change our water and then to actively not treat it properly and then lie to us saying it was safe. And then when people started dying and having all these health problems, they actively and are still actively covering it up. This is a crime. People are dead. So please remember that when you want to talk about the Flint water crisis and how our water is, there's other cities that have worse water than us. This is not a competition. That's terrible. That's terrible. None of us.
And also, nobody actually knows what the lead levels are in Flint and what crap is still in the water, which is something that, having Jordan and I did the reporting, knocking on all those doors and found that they were testing improperly. And so, they're still testing, but not a lot about about their current
anybody
testing.
that we brought in to independently test the water has been, bought off, run off, whatever. And they completely, even if we use labs that have higher certifications than our state labs, They're just like, no, you're just making it up. You must have got that water from somewhere else. Oh, yeah. Or the fun one, you put that lead in your water. Where did I go? To Sam's, and I got that bulk, like, sprinkle. You just sprinkle it here, like a little bit here, a little bit here, a little bit of lead here. We're like, what? But yeah, so somehow us ignorant folks that don't know anything about science, we bought powdered water, lead, and metals and sprinkled it into our tap water and drank it. Because
a real mastermind. God.
I know.
Yeah.
We're just brilliant, but we're stupid. We can't understand
Brilliant,
science.
but depends on what what the goal is, whether you're brilliant or stupid. Yeah, it's just crazy, and as you well know, there's been a lot of propaganda put out there about so-called citizen science and false reporting and this and that. And also, you can talk about this or not, but there have been intimidation tactics used. And so if there's no there, then why are they doing this?
These same people that are tight with, AG Nessel, and, they were tight with Rich Baird. They were texting back and forth with Rich Baird on his personal phone. That must be nice. These people, there's a group of people that have fought to say we need to move Flint forward, basically forward over the bodies, like you're in a car, run them over, don't fix it, just run them over. They want to, so it's businesses and such that want to move Flint forward, and they want people like me to shut up. So they then tried to say I don't live in Flint. I'm like, dude, really? Come to my house. And here's the thing, then they would then put out publicly my home address and say, go get her. My home address is in Flint. You just said I don't live in Flint. Then you said go get her. Oh, okay. Also, it's not hard to find. I had to, put an affidavit in and all that stuff. When we sued, I had to be a Flint resident, so I had to blah blah blah. My name and address on there. It's not that big heavy. But we got some big old dogs now, and some security, because somebody tried busting out, cutting my brake lines. That's $18. Somebody owes me $18 because we didn't clean up the mountains.
Incredibly dangerous. Like,
oh yeah, it was
that's
also
insane.
Yeah, because I was at a concert where we were collecting all these cases of water, so our vehicles were heavy loaded down. And then, wow, there's 3 puncture holes in the brake line. That was fine before we went there. And then you can see a guy in a hoodie rolling up under my car. I'm like, okay, so why don't you tell me what mountain I was going to careen off of? So now I'm just mad, and somebody owes me $18 and my husband's time for replacing it. But seriously, and then my property taxes got doubled magically because whatever. And then, I don't live in my house that I live in. And then blah, 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 blah. So it's been nonstop. And then, of course, the lawsuit for $3 million. Yeah. That was 9 months of me thinking, okay, where am I going to get $3 million? You can't sell my neighborhood for $3 million. But they just wanted me to shut up because then I had to really monitor what I said for, 9 months. But the judge said she didn't say anything wrong. And she has every right, like every citizen does, living in a crisis, to say what's going on. And you don't have a right to say anything. But then apparently the whole thing was me saying the water was still bad, and him going out there saying that the water was fixed. He fixed it in 2016. Let me get this watch I don't have. Yeah. That it was preventing him from getting further awards and money and cash awards for being a hero, for fixing us, and from getting hired and brought into other cities to fix them too. Yeah.
I don't know what kind of sick freak sues a sick Flint mother for $3 million.
That's terrible optics. I'm like, why would you do that?
Yeah,
that's just stupid. But he did, and that was interesting. And I have an amazing attorney that took me on, even though I'm broke and I couldn't have any money to give him. Yeah. So there was that. But then again, I'm the Mays and Mays v. Snyder, and if you can discredit me and my medical documentation and my water testing and all that stuff, then that weakens the case overall. So
yeah,
I want to ask you, kind of winding down. Obviously, Rick Snyder was the governor. His administration was Republican, but I don't know. He was brought into the Congress in 2016, and we've produced reporting that he perjured himself. The Democrats control the House of Representatives now, and they control the House Oversight Committee. When I approached them after our January story for The Intercept, which showed the governor's phone calls with his top advisors that prosecutors thought were incriminating. I asked them, hey, you're going to bring him back in because the state investigation has nothing to do with Congress. And they basically gave me, a word salad of, well, we don't want to affect the ongoing criminal proceedings, blah, 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 blah. So, again, the governor of Michigan's a Democrat. The attorney general of Michigan's a Democrat. The Congress is controlled by Democrats. Let's be clear, Rick Snyder has most of the blame, as does his administration. But, I know that the media and Congress is still very focused on the Capitol attack. I get it. Like, it was terrible. I know, cases are going up, but I kind of think our government's big enough to walk and chew gum at the same time. So do you believe Congress should drag Rick Snyder back? What is President Biden's responsibility? Because he told a whole lot of people in black communities, poor communities, that he's their guy, justice. It doesn't seem like anything's happening. We know nothing. We know there's questions about why the state prosecution only charged him with a misdemeanor in light of all this evidence. What about the federal lack of action?
Right. Somebody before had asked about the RICO case. There was a RICO case that got started years ago. I don't know where that went. It just disappeared.
Oh, Governor Dana Nessel, the Attorney General's prosecutors, they dropped the financial charges that the previous investigation had charged multiple officials with.
So in the trash. Cool. With the rest of it. Good. Oh, okay. Great. Wonderful. That's super helpful. And let's just remember that Rep. Elijah Cummings, who was a huge champion for us, he, once it came out that Snyder had perjured himself, wanted to bring Snyder back in. Unfortunately, he passed. But he was working and was in close connection with our former mayor, Karen Weaver. And Snyder's office, Rich Baird, had tried to get her to put in a word to Elijah Cummings to not drag Snyder back. And unfortunately, he passed, and apparently nobody picked up that torch. But yeah, he perjured himself, lied right to y'all's faces. You think that the truth would be important? Because yes, the truth about January 6th, super important, but not the only important thing going on. The man that's getting charged with a parking ticket lied to Congress, which, yeah, feds should have their own action going on because he lied to them. Yeah, just saying, like, hey, dude lied. And but then also, if you look, because I was at both hearings for the Flint water crisis, if you look at all the documents, Snyder kept saying, oh, but look at the thousands of emails and documents I've released with all these FOIAs. They were all just black rectangles. Everything was redacted. I'm fairly certain somebody's lunch menu was redacted because redact. If it said Flint or hinted to it at all. And they just brought out the huge, I don't know if you can go back and watch the videos. They brought out these huge documents, the stack of documents that were all just redacted. It was all garbage. And he's like, and then Snyder's like, yeah, that's me being honest. Look at me. I'm being transparent. What? So he hasn't even hidden the fact that he lied. He's obstructed justice. He has blocked the truth from coming out. But then he turns around and is like, oh, no, I know I did all those things to block the truth from coming out, but I have no power over any of these things about the truth coming out. I mean, I did it, but then I don't have any power to do it. I did it, but I didn't do it. My people did it, but I didn't know about it. But I knew everything. I read everything that came across my desk. Yeah, so, I mean, unless there's multiple Rick Snyders, I mean, it really isn't a stretch to realize, yo, dude's lying to you. And why he's lying? To cover it up and to try to still, to this day, right now, the Carragandi Water Authority, the privatized pipeline, the whole reason our water was switched, not because Flint was broke, because if we were broke, we wouldn't have had $300 million to put forth for these bonds that are coming due, so Wall Street can make their money off of Flint.
So people know the KWA was what they were going to switch over to after the Flint River, but they needed like a gap solution.
Right. Because it wasn't created. Now, remind you, all of the counties and the towns that are right next to Flint didn't get their water switched, and they were going on the KWA. They were allowed to stay on the Detroit Clean Water. Only Flint was switched because, environmental racism much? So, so the white towns around us were not switched. And so they got put on the KWA. They had to have their orthophosphates doubled not too long after the switch. I'm laughing, but not at them. I'm laughing because most of them said that we were blowing this out of the water and we're just thugs and blah, blah, blah. We don't deserve clean water and all that stuff. And then came to me for help. with their water being bad. So anyhow, now what they're trying to do is blend the KWA. They just had a little meeting saying that they're going to blend the KWA, the Karagandhi Water Authority pipeline, which is untreated. They're going to blend it in with 500,000 gallons per day. So that way we can pay for that pipeline. So that way the bondholders who helped fund the pipeline can get their money, get their bond payments. So one, our water bills are going to go up now because the bond payments are coming due. Wall Street needs its money. And so now our water is going to go from being clean Detroit water to blended with this Karagandhi experimental pipeline that we fought.
And also,
hard.
by the way, so people like realize what it means that the water is untreated, that untreated water is helpful for several industries, farming and things like that, fracking. Yeah. So
auto industry. Yeah, because they don't want to. So the farms and fracking and the auto industry don't want to pay the money to remove the treatment chemicals because they corrode their car parts. So you know how broke they are, all these big corporations. So they're going to pipe 70 miles of untreated water to our dilapidated water treatment plant and they're going to sell off to the corporations. They're going to make money off of it. They're going to sell off this, and then we're going to get the junk that's left over. Awesome. So we fought, and our former Mayor Karen Weaver fought and said, no, we're not going back to this. And then notice she's no longer in office. Uh-oh, you stepped on the wealthy people's toes. And that's probably, like I said, one of the main reasons why I'm not allowed in these meetings anymore, because obviously the corporations control our environmental laws.
There seems to be a real habit of getting rid of anyone who's speaking out or doing anything against, the murder of a mostly Black poor city.
Right.
Interesting.
It's more against the law to speak out and cost wealthy people their investment money and their bond money on Wall Street than it is to poison 100,000 poor, Black and brown folks. So yeah, it's cool. And again, this is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about how this can be replicated in, basically you can have a well, let me just say, we were saying it in 2016, when a failed businessman, because Governor Snyder had ran Gateway Computers into the ground, not before he stopped out his money though. So he was elected as one tough nerd, a businessman who then knew nothing that was going on in his own government offices. To run our state into the ground. Then we had a failed businessman running our country into the ground. Shocking. But then allowing these corporations and industry to come in and snatch up and pay for, carbon offsets and all this other BS and stuff, and then to, not get held accountable. We're still suing Veolia, the water privatization company, and land, the environmental, the engineering firm, two private companies, and the EPA, who still have not stepped up to say, yeah, we'll settle and get the residents of Flint back on their feet and healthy. Nope. So yeah, and Veolia is worth $235 billion because they just took over Suez water. Now again, this is the stuff that can be replicated to your community. They can privatize your water, and what happens then is once it's taken out of municipal control, you really don't have a say, much like in emergency management. You don't have a say in what happens with your water. And when you want to go report something's wrong, who are you going to go to? Because it's a private corporation. Good luck. So, and to this day, no public-private partnerships, whether it be, tarmacs for airports or water, like in Atlanta, have been successful. And the people are the ones that pay the price. So let's just keep that in mind. You might not be Flint yet. Just give it time and some cash.
I think that's a really important
cheery. Oh, wait, I gotta think of something cheery to say before we end. Well, if we didn't have you guys, none of this would be out there at all. They'd still just say that we're afraid of our water because we're stupid, or because we don't trust our elected officials, which actually shouldn't have their hands on our water anyways, because scientists exist. But no. The thing is that yes, this is massive. I've listed a bazillion problems, and it's huge, and David and Goliath type of deal. But we keep throwing them stones and hitting them in the eye. And even if we're just, we have made we've made history with our Safe Drinking Water Act case. Never has, have residents sued and beaten the government and forced them to actually fix something. Surprise, especially when it comes to water. But also changing the laws, doing all this stuff. We're just a bunch of poor, poisoned folks that have fought back because we're just like, nah, what do we got to lose? Nothing, because we're going to fight back because you've done destroyed, everything. But we're not going to let you do it. We're not going to go away quietly. So just don't ever feel like I don't know the science, or I don't have the letters after my name. I don't have a PhD. I don't, I don't know I didn't know any of this stuff until I got into it, until your life depends on it. So don't wait that long until you're already being poisoned to fight back. Ask these questions. You have every right to know what's in your water, who's testing it, what they're testing for, because they like to skip the nasties and say, well, we're not finding it because they're not testing for it. Clever. I'll help review your consumer confidence report around your water that most people just toss in the trash. Definitely look at that. But the thing is that we've learned a lot in all of this, and we're happy to share our knowledge and the fight. And, we got your backs. Don't forget us, and we won't forget you. And we appreciate you guys listening in and supporting these awesome journalists when nobody else seems to care about Flint. And the whole thing is, this is a warning, because it can happen to you. It might be already on the starts. It just depending on who's in office. Pay attention. Local elections matter too. So everybody, you run and go to office. Go get in office and make some changes and block these messy laws that keep harming people. And we do have wins. Yes, this is dragging on, and yes, this sucks, and I'm tired, and I'm sick of being tired. And it makes me mad that somebody did this to me and my family and my neighbors. But we're not going to let them rest easy, even if it's just our ghosts. It doesn't matter. We're not going to shut up. We're not going to go away. And thanks to Jordan and Jen, you're going to help us continue to jab the pencil in their eye, the leaded pencil in their eye. And hopefully we'll find some justice. And we just appreciate you guys and all of the supporters. So thank you guys all very, very much. And,
how can people watching help Flint, help you, tell them your links and stuff?
So my group is Water You Fighting For, WATER, and then you just spell out youfightingfor.com, flintrising.com. That's a lot of the work. Follow us on social media. On Twitter, I'm Flintgate, because Watergate was taken, and I'm clever. Not really.
It is clever.
but so definitely follow us on social media. Please share out all of the status quo stories about Flint. Go back and look at all of them, because you'll see over and over and over again, proving that the water tests were doctored, proving that the people are lying, proving that their appointed heroes and experts were not telling the truth, and all the work. And it is kind of impressive. They spent a lot of money, and they've put in a lot of work to discredit little old us. So just help us with that fighting back, and reach out to us. If you've got something going on, we'll do our best to help. We do, we'll do Zoom meetings and help you with, especially during this time, because we are immunocompromised. Some of us have autoimmune disorders and can't get the vaccine. Yep, because there's no studies done on people with autoimmune disorders. So my body just might attack me and not develop the antibodies. And I already had COVID once, and I don't want to do it again. It sucked. You know this, Jen and Jordan. Yeah. Don't make me yell at you people for not getting sick again. Knock it off. We need you. So there's a lot of things that you can do to help us. But the biggest thing is just push your elected officials from your school board on up. Everybody demand to know what's in your water and where it's going and who's profiting off of it and what you're drinking. And get your water tested independently. Just, don't do what I did when they said, hey, we're the people in charge of your water and we're telling you it's safe. I'm like, okay, cool. I mean, do your job. Don't assume because you do your job that they do theirs. And just stay safe. No matter what, just protect yourself, stay safe, and scream the truth from the rooftops. Just fight back, because the more of us that do, the fewer the chances are that they can single us out and, shut us up. Like George's. So, yeah. So anyhow, and just be safe and, support your independent media that actually tells the truth. And,
Can I just ask you one more thing? Last thing, I promise. Since, everybody goes in little sound bites these days, we try not to. But what would be your message to the current criminal prosecution team? Attorney General Nessel says she's not involved. Take that for what you want. But to the current prosecutors who charged the governor with a misdemeanor, who, while doing that, said, as new evidence becomes available, our investigation is ongoing. As far as I know, everything we reported, they've already had, which makes you wonder, did they present this evidence to the judge who was the one-man grand jury? But what would be your message to Attorney General Dana Nessel, who said, one of my top missions as Attorney General is justice for Flint? Seems to me there's still time to charge the governor with more. And frankly, what about the other officials in these stories that it seems like there was tampering with evidence or obstruction of justice? What is your message to the Attorney General?
To the people that are pressing the charges and handling the Flint water crisis investigation, the criminal side right now, let's try not to talk about that invisible conflict wall between the civil and criminal cases.
That doesn't really exist.
No, it's invisible for a reason because it doesn't exist. Do what's right. We're watching you, and I don't know what you think justice for Flint means, but hiding from us and not answering our questions and putting things behind closed doors is not the transparency that you promised us. So how about you do right by us, the people that you represent, the victims, the people who have been victimized in Flint. Answer our questions, charge people with what they deserve to be charged with. And this evidence has been sitting in your lap. And if you don't have this for some reason, why don't you reach out to the journalists who do? There. And do what's right by us and actually get us justice. $1,000 misdemeanor is not justice. It is not justice. You hold these people accountable. You said you would. You promised us that you would hold them accountable and do it. That's it. Just do your jobs. Take politics out of it because we're humans. Do what's right by us. I mean, at this point, you charged an ex-husband who tried to poison his wife, one man poisoning one person with sleeping pills. You charged him with more than you charged Governor Snyder for poisoning the water of 100,000 innocent people. 100,000 innocent people that you represent. So do your job. Do right by us. Be transparent and get us justice.
And I'll just add, and then we could really wrap. I don't know. Michigan media seems to be sleep at the switch, but isn't it interesting? Isn't it interesting that the original investigation, led by a prosecutor that Attorney General Nessel fired, isn't it interesting that the original investigation was building a RICO case, which they use usually against the mafia, had filed charges against several state officials for bond fraud, financial crimes, and then after the current Attorney General wiped clean that investigation and dropped charges against 8 officials who had been charged. In fairness, some of those charges were brought back, but when she brought back those charges, the media didn't seem to know that when she brought back charges against officials who had been charged with financial crimes, she didn't bring back those charges. And why this is important, as Jenn alluded to, as Melissa talked about, there was a privatization scheme that was the dark underbelly of the Flint water crisis. Rick Snyder wanted to privatize the water system, which is happening all over the country. As a result, they were creating a totally unnecessary new water pipeline. Flint had gotten its water from Detroit, no problem, for 50 years, I think. Mm-hmm. But they built a water pipeline to go that exact same parallel path to the existing pipeline. And basically a fake environmental emergency was crafted to allow Flint, a nearly bankrupt city, to go beyond its debt limit and borrow millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars, to join this water pipeline. And as that water pipeline was under construction, that Flint was going to join through financial fraud, they should have never been able to join that pipeline or borrow more money. They were temporarily going to be on the Flint River. Here's some questions. Number one, why didn't you bring back those financial charges? Number two, and I have this from many sources, well, guess what? If the current Attorney General and her team advanced major charges against Governor Rick Snyder, if they advanced those financial fraud charges, guess who would be on the hook? If bondholders, because banks own those bonds, wealthy investors own those bonds. In fairness, average people sometimes buy bonds. Guess who would be on the hook potentially for over $1 billion if there was bond fraud that advanced in court? Even if it went to pretrial, you could see people ask, big money players wanted their money back. The state of Michigan would be on the hook for that because they signed off on it. So seems to me we could say, oh, the attorney general is separate from the governor's office, but I don't know. The Democratic governor of Michigan probably doesn't want all of Michigan's money or the state to go bankrupt to pay what they really should pay. So kind of makes sense why one investigation charges financial crimes, but the other investigation doesn't seem to see financial crimes. One investigation finds evidence to charge him with misconduct in office and thinks there's evidence to charge him with involuntary manslaughter. They were building the case. To be clear, they weren't ready to charge, but they were building that case. Another investigation doesn't see that. They see a misdemeanor. Can somebody in the Michigan media ask these obvious questions? I'm sorry, but I always say follow the money because it's always involved. And this prosecution, this administration has a motivation to get this thing done, charge some lower level people. Sure, maybe charge the governor's right-hand man with a lot. But if they move forward with Snyder, because Snyder was involved with that financial deal, he presided over meetings about that pipeline, the state of Michigan could be bankrupted.
I want to add that March of 2015, not even a year, so 11 months after the water switch, we've been marching, protesting, doing everything we could to get the word out, testing the water, doing, everything. But at that point, it was relatively new in the water crisis, so, March 2015, our city council, who's pretty much dysfunctional as can be, voted unanimously to get off of the Flint River and to go back to Detroit. Now, Governor Snyder's emergency manager that he appointed, we didn't elect, that he handpicked and appointed, Jerry Ambrose, said, no, I'm vetoing this vote. It's inconceivable, the switch back to Detroit, and it would cost too much money. And then sold off the pipeline that would connect us back to Detroit to the Genesee County, which is where Flint sits, for $3 million. So it'd be too expensive to switch back to Detroit. But instead of listening to us continue to push and fight for it, he sold off the pipe that would allow us to go back. So it was inconceivable. It was too expensive. It didn't matter that people were dying. It didn't matter that people's skin was falling off. It didn't matter that people's pets were dying, that ladies were miscarrying, and people were having heart attacks and strokes and seizures and all this stuff. That hell was raining down on the residents of Flint. That wasn't even it didn't even matter. And also, Darnell Early, the previous emergency manager that was handpicked by Governor Snyder, who had filed that fraudulent environmental emergency that was allowed us to be able to switch our water. So when people asked him in October of 2014 why the General Motors was allowed to switch off the Flint River, but the residents of Flint weren't, when talking about corroded car parts versus damaged human bodies, he said, it's apples and oranges. So there you go. Money. And that's the thing. I was told, Erin Brockovich told me early on when my brakes got cut, she said, well, you're going to embarrass some people and they might get kicked out of office or they might lose in the next election. And that's bad. That's bad. You might make them look bad and that's bad. But when you actually get, in trouble is when you step on their wallets, when you cost them a single dollar, when you cost the banks like Wells Fargo money, when you touch their money, that's when it gets dangerous. So, and that's what it's been all along. They don't care about the human lives. They don't care about the home destruction. They don't care about the property values, none of that stuff. They'd rather bulldoze us down and turn us into a cute little suburbia than actually fix the human lives that they've destroyed. But they're not going to do that because it would cost money. So there's that.
Absolutely. And I would also say, at the end of the day, I will go back to what I said at the beginning. Why this matters? This is the biggest government cover-up of the 21st century. You cannot show me anything that had this many layers of corruption, this many layers of cover-up, a cover-up in real time while people were getting sick, and then a cover-up after it went national in the media. You cannot show me something that is a cover-up that killed this many people, because the truth is Nobody knows how many people died from this. There was no registry created to track residents' health, residents who still live there, residents that left Michigan. We don't know how many people have died since then. We don't know what they died of when lead and bacteria ravage your body. By the way, there was other crazy toxins in that water that never got headlines in the media. So we don't know how many people got sick. But what we do know, because Jen and I knocked on the doors, when we knocked on the doors in 2018, okay, literally, probably every other block, we would get someone to open the door. We would say to them, ask the questions we had, and then say, hey, do you know if this person or that person are home? Oh, they died recently. Like, not like 75, 80-year-olds. We're talking 40, 50, like relatively middle-aged people, young people. So nobody knows how many people died from this. We do know how many people got sick from it, and that's tens of thousands of people. By the way, these people have had a seven-year pandemic, not a year and a half. So there's a deadly pandemic going around. These people are already immunocompromised without a deadly airborne.
I just want to add that for the longest time, we had a 12.5% fatality rate for COVID here, which was way higher than the rest of the world. So, but yet nobody cared. Immunocompromised people, autoimmune disorders caused by environmental toxins. We lost a lot of really good people. Lung damage, weakened lungs from inhaling the chemicals or having Legionnaire's disease and surviving. We lost a lot of good people. And, right. I have a heart monitor implanted and I have to deal with this long aftermath. So, yeah, and nobody did anything extra to protect us. 100,000 immunocompromised people. So, yeah, Absolutely. We don't know how many people have been lost because these wealthy people, these politicians wanted to make this decision that they needed to make more money and they needed to profit off of our water.
But we do know how many people. We do know how many people have been convicted. That's zero. We do know how many people have seen a jury trial. That's zero. That's what we do know. So to wrap it up, I will also add, Michael Moore, if you're watching, we're counting on you on this. Michael Moore, you had me on your podcast last time.
Let him have it.
We need you to raise holy hell because honestly, sad to say, it seems the only way the media is actually going to give a damn about the poisoning of a community, leaving them to die after, and then covering it all up is if celebrities raise hell. It's gotten to that point in American media and culture. So I really hope, Michael Moore, I know you're busy. This is the biggest government cover-up of the 21st century. It's much bigger than just Flint. This is about what kind of country do we live in? Is it a country where if the government purposely or just accidentally poisons you, that they hide it in real time, that they cover it up in real time, that they tell you after the fact, no, it's getting better, you're crazy, that they threaten journalists? You know how many times Jen and I have been threatened? Not just by media or other people. The sitting attorney general put out a statement basically low-key threatening us last year for the crime of reporting. So please, Michael Moore and everybody, please share this. Please get on your other hosts to cover this, to have us on if they can. Because I got news for you. It doesn't matter if this was 7 years ago, 7 months ago, 7 minutes ago. It's still a crisis. This is what people need to understand. All you got to do is go to Flint. Don't listen to people on Twitter. All you got to do is go to Flint, go in some people's homes. You'll, in many cases, smell funky water. In some cases,
I'm happy to let you smell the tap water.
In some cases, you'll see brown water. Talk to residents, see how safe they think the water is. So talk to experts that aren't on the EPA's or state of Michigan's payroll. So that's why we keep covering it. Thank you for coming on, Melissa.
Anytime. You guys are the best.
Melissa.
Thank you. And thank you all for not forgetting about us and reminding us that our lives do matter. So. And
I truly hope more Flint residents learn about this because that's what pisses me off the most. It's not just
we got to tell them. I mean, that's the thing. And we know this. They need to know this. And as heavy as this burden has been, they need to know who's been stomping on our backs and making it heavier so we can hold them accountable.
Yep. Thanks, Melissa.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much.
We will be back tomorrow. We don't know what time because we're hoping we'll get some opportunities to go on shows. But we'll be back tomorrow because there's quite a lot more in that story that we didn't get to today. But thank you for watching. Thank you for supporting us. For whoever's left, please, for the love of fucking Christ, sign up as a Status Coup member. Statuscoup.com/join. Statuscoup.com/join. These revelations are, it doesn't just, they're not airdropped to us. We've been to Flint, thanks to you. I've been there 17 times. Jen, I think you're on 8 or 9. I don't know.
We like seeing their faces.
Right. It all costs money to actually build sources, dig, break shit. So your $5 a month actually makes it happen. So statuscoup.com/join. We're at 1,900 right now, 1,900 members. Let's just expedite this thing to 2,000. We've gotten close, then we lost members, then we gain. Let's get to 2,000 so then we could focus on bigger milestones. Thanks for watching. Talk to you later.